Can I just say something about Andrea?
Hey guys, it's been a minute, hasn't it? I appreciate all of you joining me here this morning to get a little introduction to the case of Luigi Mangione. So I got interested in this case because, I saw a lot about it in the media and it captured my attention because the most kind of obvious forward facing thing about it was that it is a case of political violence. And it's gotten a rather different reaction than I think some other high profile political violence that we've seen lately. So like with the case of Charlie Kirk, um, there was like some celebration of that by Charlie Kirk's political opponents or people who like see themselves as opposing Charlie Kirk and his viewpoints and what he stood for and so forth. But it didn't translate into like a big fan club for Tyler Robinson, at least not as far as what I've seen. Luigi's case is quite different because he has attracted this groundswell of support. He's got a legal defense fund that is aiming to raise about $1.5 million. It has currently raised over $1.3 million. And so I was intrigued by this. I wanted to know a little bit more about why. Why is this happening? Um, is this reflecting like a sort of mood change as far as kind of the tolerance and maybe even celebration of political violence? Is this a situation that's kind of like Dzhokhar Tsarnaev? You remember the Boston Marathon bomber? Good looking young guy. So they put him on the cover of Rolling Stone, despite the fact that, he committed a terrible crime that killed and injured and, traumatized tons and tons of people. Is it a situation where he's being unjustly prosecuted? I really don't know. I feel like just based on, what I saw in the media, I've kind of seen different perspectives on whether there's good evidence against him, whether there's like concerns about the process and the fairness of the process. So I really just wanted to understand, I guess, a little bit better what is going on with all of this case. So I did, and I wanted to go ahead and start by just kind of outlining where the case is at, like what's happened so far, where it's at, because it's almost a year old now. It was December 4th of 2024. When Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot outside a Manhattan hotel. And then we had a multi-day manhunt that culminated in the arrest and charging of Luigi Mangione. There is a hearing that is coming up in the state case on December the 1st. And so part of what I wanted to do is try to get myself a little bit caught up before all of that happens. As a little bit of an aside, it is kind of nap time for the cats, but they aren't necessarily very good at it. So we may get some interruptions. Gus here is he's kind of the constant lap fixture. So he has been and will probably continue to be on my lap. You can't really see his sleepy face right now, but he is tired. We'll probably be dozing off. But at any point, we might get visited by hordes of other, there he is, the little cute boy. We might get visited by hordes of other invaders. So just be prepared and we'll roll with it as it happens. So just first by way of background, Luigi is charged in 3 separate courts. Like I mentioned, he was arrested in Pennsylvania, and so he faces charges in Pennsylvania arising out of the circumstances of his arrest. They involve the possession of a firearm, presenting a false identification, essentially, a number of charges related to those basic facts. As far as the actual killing, he's charged in the state of New York, and then he's also charged federally in the Southern District of New York. There's a little bit of weirdness about that I'm not going to have an opportunity to kind of get into today in any degree of depth. But he does have simultaneous prosecutions going on in the federal court and in the state court for the killing of Brian Thompson. And so this is something that the defense has tried to fight. There's been some litigation surrounding this because what's happening from a timing standpoint is that the state case is proceeding much more quickly than the federal case is. It looks like it's much more likely to be set for trial and to proceed. But the federal case is far more significant from a consequences standpoint because the federal case is a death penalty case. The death penalty is on the table there. So the defense has argued that this puts them in a difficult position as far as how do we defend against the state case, because defenses that they assert, witnesses that they present, should Luigi testify, all of this type of thing would then become available to the feds in the more serious prosecution. And it forces them to make difficult strategic decisions about what is in the short-term interests of defeating this New York State case versus what is in the long-term interests of defeating the federal death penalty case. I would note that if you haven't run into the simultaneous prosecution before and why that's not a due process problem or a double jeopardy problem, it can be, but it rarely is. And the reason why is because the state and the federal governments are separate sovereigns. Double jeopardy is really a very limited doctrine. It's one of those provisions of the Constitution that's kind of been refined down to mean very little. And so in the US, separate sovereigns prosecuting the same person for the same event does not violate the double jeopardy clause. So it's going to be allowed to happen. The question is really whether it implicates some kind of due process concern that affects his ability to get a fair trial because of these issues with potentially having different strategies, potentially having different defenses, potentially, having to hold your cards close in order to save up your goods for the more significant case. So in New York State, he's charged with second-degree murder. I'm going to start with what he was originally, charged at because things have changed, and I do want to talk about that in the coming days, but not going to have a chance to get to it today. So he was charged with second-degree murder, possession of a weapon in the second degree, 2 counts of that, possession of a forged instrument, and also possession of a weapon in the third degree. So 5 different charges in New York State court. And then in the federal court, he's charged with stalking using interstate travel, stalking with the use of interstate facilities, meaning interstate transportation systems, murder by use of a firearm, which is the death penalty eligible case, and then use of a firearm in a crime. So he's got a lot of charges, for this one thing. It's let me count here: 5 in Pennsylvania, 5 in New York, 14 separate charges, for the one event. I mean, it's not super unusual, I guess, that something like that will happen, particularly in a high profile case like this. One of the things that I've kind of had in the back of my mind that I've been comparing this to a little bit is the prosecution of DeAndre Brown. You may remember DeAndre Brown is the gentleman who killed Irina Zarutska. And so he was arrested, pretty immediately, charged in the North Carolina trial court, the Superior Court. But then there was also a rapid announcement by the feds. The feds were going to prosecute as well. And so they did file a complaint against Mr. Brown. But the way the cases are proceeding it's just extremely different. It's extremely different. And so with Mr. Brown's case, there's a little bit of a complication, which is that what, frankly, I think anybody with any experience in the criminal justice system saw coming was that there's competency issues and there's likely insanity related defenses that are going to be fleshed out on the table. And so the very first thing that happened in the state court was that the defense asked for the process to be delayed so that he could be evaluated for competency, and that's where it's sitting. They have a status hearing set for April because that's how freaking backed up the mental health system is. Even to be able to prosecute somebody for a crime, takes months and months and months to get them access to any kind of mental health in the state of North Carolina. And the federal case has basically, they filed a complaint, they issued an arrest warrant, and there it is sat. There's been no action taken. They haven't, tried to get custody of him to move forward in their own independent case. Luigi's case is very, very, very different. He had these simultaneous prosecutions, but the feds took action to instantaneously get control of him, get custody of him, and to subject him to this federal process at the same time that the state process is going on. I have some questions about exactly how that happened, but like I said, I'm not going to talk about that today because it's just going to get a little bit far in the weeds for what I'd like to do, which is basically go over the initial charging documents that we got from all of these different jurisdictions, and there's some associated press releases that I'm going to go ahead and look at as well. And this is just to get a little bit of grounding in what the evidence was at the time of Mr. Mangione's arrest. Like in many cases, same thing is kind of going on with Tyler Robinson's case. When you have this really short time frame between somebody is identified as a suspect and then that person is arrested and charged, it's often the case that a lot of the investigation hasn't happened at the point of that charging decision. It happens afterwards. And so Luigi's case is no different. He was identified, maybe a little bit of lack of clarity about exactly when, but generally understood to be very close in time to when he was arrested there in Pennsylvania. And so a lot of subsequent investigation, things like looking into his devices, looking into his financial records, looking into DNA, things like that. They don't have access to that beforehand because they've only just learned who he is. So a lot of that stuff comes out only after the fact. So I bring that up to point out that what we're going to be looking at right here today is just sort of the initial, what was out there. This is why he was arrested. And so there are, from my perspective, some kind of holes in it, maybe some questions about it that haven't necessarily been filled in when these events are happening. Now, like I said, there's been some subsequent litigation in the case that has brought a lot more of the evidence to light. And so I am planning to talk about that next time when we get into the motions to suppress that have been filed and the response to that. That's the hearing that is coming up on December the 1st in the New York State Court. It's a hearing on his motion to suppress statements that he made at the time of his arrest, motion to suppress evidence that was uncovered in his backpack at the time of his arrest, and then motion to preclude identification evidence from a non-eyewitness. Not like expert, I'm an expert facial recognition, person. I use this system, and here's how the system has been validated. Like that type of thing is not at issue. What's at issue is somebody just lay saying, oh, I recognize this guy as so-and-so, and here's why. And there's a New York State case that came out within the last couple of years that dealt with that. And so that's ultimately like the third thing that has to be addressed, relating to the circumstances of how Luigi was identified as a suspect. So, case context wise, as far as what has happened so far, I want to give us a kind of just rough outline before we go into looking at the evidence in the case, because it paints a little bit of a picture of where maybe some of the attention to Luigi's case, some of the support for Luigi and just maybe to anticipate kind of where the battle lines are being drawn is laid out. And so it all started when Luigi was arrested on February the 9th. He was arrested in Pennsylvania, as I said. He was extradited. He waived extradition and was taken to New York. And then in New York, he was perp walked very publicly. There was it was like dramatically staged. I should have got a picture of it. I didn't even think of that. Maybe I should, maybe I can get one real quick. See if I can find it. I mean, it was like cinematic. There was this image of him. Here's one. Maybe I can find that one. This image of him, being walked, shackled in his orange jumpsuit, surrounded by, here it is. Let me bring this up. Surrounded by, all of these police officers. The mayor of New York is there, the feds. I mean, look at this assault rifle there. That was like the first glimpse of Luigi. And so it's very, highly stage managed, visual. Look at it. Look how he pops out in that orange jumpsuit. And the reason why this is important is because the publicity in this case and the imagery in this case is becoming one of the subjects of dispute, and it's inviting quite a bit of litigation about it. So we started just with that perp walk. Right off the bat, there's, discovery issues. There's going to be a lot of discovery. And one of the concerns is being able to coordinate with Luigi to review his discovery. So there was a request for him to be able to have a laptop so that he can review it himself. Kind of important when you have a high volume of information, because, if the only way you can review the discovery with your client is you have to go sit in the jail with them and go through it with them, it's not viable. It's not feasible. It's not realistic. So having some opportunity for the defendant to have their own copy of the discovery is kind of an important part of being able to adequately defend against the charge. So that request came about very early on, but it sat for a while and nothing really happened. The next thing after this perp walk was the announcement of the federal indictment. It came down, and there was also then another public announcement by Attorney General Bondi about she had directed her prosecutors to pursue the death penalty in the case. And that instantly triggered a motion to preclude the death penalty on the basis of this, this kind of publicity, the lack of consistency with normal DOJ procedure as far as how death penalty decisions are made, the PR element of sort of getting good press by announcing that you're going to be doing this, you're going to be stepping in and taking charge, kind of like they did with DeAndre Brown, right? They got a big headline over that. Good kudos for being hard on crime or whatever, but haven't actually had to follow up on that. So there's definitely a press management component to what is going on. So it fed into this motion to preclude the death penalty by the defense. Next up, there was a problem with his phone calls with his lawyer being intercepted. And so that's a situation where he's being held in federal custody. They have, of course, a phone system. The phone system records everybody. Normally, these types of systems have some kind of mechanism to screen out attorney phone calls. The system that we use in Washington, the way that it works is you submit your phone number, your office number, to the organization, the Department of Corrections and the organization that runs the phone system. And they have like some way to enter you in the database so that that number, calls to that number, get exempted from the recording. So we are not supposed to be recorded or monitored. You don't get the warning about, your call is going to be recorded and monitored when somebody makes a call from prison to my number. But this system either doesn't operate like that, or it hadn't been set up for the attorney's phone calls, to be screened out. And so as a result, there was at least one phone call between Mr. Mangione and his attorney that was intercepted. It was reviewed by a paralegal for the New York State Prosecutor's Office. They say their sworn testimony is that the paralegal told them about it. They told the paralegal to immediately destroy all their notes about it. Nobody else listened to it. They advised everybody that it had been improperly, turned over and what they had done about it. But that was an issue that came up and required, some attention by the defense, pointing out this isn't really the way it's supposed to go. And, it puts them in a position where they have to take the state at face value. They say nobody listened to it. How are you going to prove otherwise? But it's just a chilling type of situation to be in when it comes to being able to talk on the phone with your client, because you're going to have to wonder, is this going to happen again? We then had the pretrial motions that are filed, and I already mentioned those. There's been an objection to shackling him. So he has had a hearing televised. I forget the date of the hearing, but it is available online, which is it's pretty unusual for New York State, like very strong presumption against having cameras in the courtroom in New York. So it's not real clear if that's going to continue to be a thing or if it's not. But he was, being shackled in court. So like we've seen with a lot of these high profile cases, there are concerns about how does that affect somebody's presumption of innocence if there are images of this that are being published, that are being allowed out there. The state then subpoenaed some information about Luigi's health insurance records. And apparently what happened is that the state subpoenaed these records, and what they were specifically requesting was not protected health information. It wasn't like, his records from the hospital or doctor billings or codes or anything like that. It was just something like did he have a policy and what were the dates of the policy? So in and of itself, not really a problem with the request. But the problem was that apparently the insurance company produced everything. They produced a lot of confidential health information in response to that. And so that produced some litigation as well. Defense is arguing, that shouldn't have happened. State is arguing it wasn't our fault. We didn't even ask for it. The remedy is elsewhere, but it's just another one of these issues that's kind of lurking out there. So finally, on August the 4th of this year, the federal court ordered, yes, Luigi gets to have a laptop in order to review his discovery. He is to be given access to it, so many hours a day, basically like 8 hours a day, so that he can go through his materials. But it seems maybe that hasn't happened at this point. It's not entirely clear. There seems to be some media reports that indicate he still doesn't have it yet, which is a little bit of a problem. So the next thing that happened in the New York State Court was we got some preliminary rulings on the initial motions that the defense had filed. So their initial motion was like I said, the motions to suppress, but then they also challenged the terrorism charge, murder charge, as well as argued that the simultaneous prosecutions constituted double jeopardy. So we got a kind of interim ruling on those motions where the New York Supreme Court agreed this isn't terrorism, the way that terrorism is defined in the New York statute. It doesn't mean it's not murder, and certainly doesn't mean he can't be prosecuted for murder, but it just means it's based on a different degree. It's going to have to be based on a different degree of the crime. And so the justification for that was that because of how New York defines terrorism for purposes of that enhancement, it is based on an intent to like coerce. I think the way they described it was coerce a civilian population to act, or coerce a government to take some kind of specific action. And they ultimately, their view was that just his conduct didn't satisfy this accusation because it was based on wanting to, quote unquote, like start a conversation. It wasn't intended to like terrorize people into adopting a particular policy. So that charge got thrown out. It's not being litigated as a terrorism charge in the state of New York. It's important to distinguish that from the federal case, because the federal charge, he doesn't have a specific terrorism allegation. They've used a stalking instead. So it's just it's a little bit of a different context as far as like him targeting allegedly Brian Thompson, the CEO, and kind of what the legal significance of that was. So ultimately, New York decided it doesn't constitute terrorism. You can't prosecute it that way. But they also concluded that there wasn't a double jeopardy problem, at least at this point in time, based on the simultaneous prosecutions. So both of the cases are going to continue to go forward. In the federal court, he's now filed a constitutional-based challenge to the death penalty. Some of those are specific to the case and involving, again, this issue with pretrial publicity, statements by the prosecutor and DOJ up to the very high levels, but also some general, much more general challenges that kind of apply to anybody in any death penalty allegation. These public statements, again, are getting people into trouble because way back early on in the federal case, one of the things that happened in the preliminary order was, it's not really a gag, but I guess it's kind of a gag. It's the same thing that we've seen in a lot of these cases where the courts have said, here's what the rule of professional responsibility is when it comes to being able to make public statements about a case. So folks, make sure that you follow those rules so that there's no problem. And what that does, it doesn't like create any new, obligation as far as what you can or can't say, but it creates an opportunity for the judge to be able to enforce those rules through the contempt process rather than having them only be enforceable by the disciplinary authorities, the bar, whoever is overseeing the particular jurisdiction. And so that happened because there was a gag order in the case, and then there have been these subsequent statements made by DOJ officials all the way up to Pam Bondi. And so the court took issue with that. There is pending dispute, I guess, about whether the Department of Justice is in contempt of the order because of statements that are made. So that's been litigated, hasn't been decided yet. Not quite clear if they're going to need to have a hearing on it or not because it's fairly recent. And then the last thing that's happened, kind of big picture wise, is that in the federal court, there has now been a similar motion to suppress and to dismiss the charges as what was filed in the New York State Court. So you can see just timing wise, it's lagging a little bit. So I wanted to bring this up one just to kind of have perspective on where the case is at and what's happened, but also to get a little bit of perspective about what some of the process objections to Luigi's prosecution might be grounded in. Like, if it's not fair, what evidence do we have in the record that it's not fair? And also, is this unique to Luigi, or are these things that are kind of routine and kind of commonplace? Just, probably not acceptable, but also sort of a normal part of criminal litigation in these various jurisdictions. So with that, guys, I want to go ahead and turn to the original factual basis for the charges here. There's, like I said, 3 different jurisdictions that are prosecuting him. And so we have 3 different documents, statements that give us, as you'll see, kind of an increasing amount of information about what the investigation consisted of, how did they identify Luigi, and where is the investigation likely to go? Where are there holes in the investigation, and so forth. So we're starting with the Pennsylvania criminal complaint. Of course, that's where he was arrested. It was the first people to get their hand on it, so to speak. It goes through the charges first that he's been charged with. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with those, but you'll see there's multiple charges: forgery, firearms not to be carried without a license, tampering with records or identification, possessing instruments of crime, and false identification to law enforcement authorities. So those are the charges. And then these are going to be the grounds supporting those. So let's go ahead and go through those. On the aforementioned date and time, on December 9th, 2024, at 9:14 hours, affiant, I don't know, honestly, what PTLM, I don't know what that is a shorthand for. I don't know if it's a trooper. I'm not sure. But anyway, Fry and Detweiler with the Altoona Police Department were dispatched to 407 East Plank Road, Altoona, for a suspicious male who resembled the male from a recent shooting in New York from December the 4th. So you guys, I remember this happening. You may remember this happening when the shooting first happened. Very little was known, and so there were some photographs of the suspect that were released publicly, and that was kind of like a big part of the manhunt, right? Is that's really what we had to go on. We had these photographs of the person that law enforcement is saying this is who did it. So help us find this person. Those photographs are in one of the future documents we're going to look at here, so I'm not going to pull it up right now. But that's the initial call, right? This 407 East Plank Road. This is a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Altoona is pretty. It looks pretty rural. It's kind of in that central Pennsylvania, between the Pittsburgh area and the Philadelphia area. So just kind of an out of nowhere place. Somebody calls from a McDonald's, says, hey, there's somebody here who looks like that person whose photograph is all over the news because he, is alleged to have shot that guy in New York. Officers were advised in the dispatch notes that the male was wearing a medical mask and a beanie. Upon arrival, officers were able to locate the male matching the aforementioned description, sitting in the rear of the building at a table. He was wearing a blue medical mask and was looking at a silver laptop computer that was placed on the table. The male also had a backpack on the floor near the table he was sitting at. Co-affiant made contact with the male and informed that officers were called to the McDonald's for a suspicious male matching his description. So this is the approach. Now, remember you Richard Allen folks, you guys that watched that watched that case. A lot of you watched it a lot longer than I did, way back in the early days, even before I was, paying significant attention to it. Right after the killings happened in 2017, and there was a big manhunt for Bridge Guy. Help us find Bridge Guy was like a big part of trying to identify the suspect in the murders. And so Bridge Guy was this screenshot that was taken from a video that was recovered from Libby German's phone. And they got thousands of tips about who is Bridge Guy. Like everybody thought Bridge Guy was, their neighbor, their brother-in-law, their old boss that they hated. Notably, like the one person that nobody ever called in and said, this is Bridge Guy, is Richard Allen, the guy they ultimately arrested, who has been working at the CVS pharmacy for many, many years, dealing with the public in Delphi, right across the street from the sheriff's office. Nobody ever called in to say he's Bridge Guy. But I bring this up just because I have to imagine that this happened a lot. This happened a lot. That a lot of people would have been like, I know somebody that looks like that. I know somebody that could be. But we don't have any context of like, what was the universe of tips that they got about who was the shooter? Why did we, did we, watch your claw, bud. Did we single out this particular one for, special attention, or did we routinely follow up on tips when somebody said, I think this might be the guy? Did we routinely send the police out to make this type of contact? I don't know, but it's a question that I have. It's just something that the circumstances raise for me. Co-affiant asked the male to pull down his medical mask so he could see his face. The male complied and pulled down his mask. Affiant and co-affiant immediately recognized him as the suspect from New York City incident after seeing photos released of him from media sources. So like I said, we're going to see those photos when we get to the FBI's or the Department of Justice's pleading in the case. But this, I got to tell you, this is not strong for me. When the photographs were first released, the problem is that some of them are masked. So you just have a very slim, picture of who the person is. And some of it, there's like two that has the mask pulled down, but they're at this very high angle. This angle that you're not normally looking at people from that angle. So you have this different perspective, this kind of distorted perspective that isn't how you would see this person just, face to face, encountering them on the street. So we immediately recognized him. I'm sus. Like, I have a hard time buying that. And so this right here is, I think the prime part of what the defense is focusing on with this motion that's coming up on the 1st of December to say, this is lay identification testimony. This is lay eyewitness, non-eyewitness testimony saying, I recognize this person from these photos. And under the New York law, you have to have a pretty good basis to be able to do that. So they're finding it sus. I kind of find it sus. I would buy that they thought, yeah, could be consistent with him, but like we immediately recognized him. I'm not really buying that. One of the things I've noticed too about Luigi is that his appearance is fairly dynamic. Like there's a fair amount of photographs of him out there right now. Stuff from, just earlier in his life, stuff from court, stuff from, jail, stuff from the body cam. There's body cam footage of this arrest that's happened. And the whole footage hasn't been released at this point, but there have been screenshots, stills from that footage that have been released, how he looks in those. Like he honestly like looks kind of different a lot of the time. So I have a hard time. I do. I have a hard time with this. We instantly recognized him. Uh, mm, just I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. If like I just feel like if they had been a little bit more moderate in their position, like we thought it really looked like him and it could be him, so we decided to investigate further. Great. That's good enough, but it's too strong. We immediately recognized him. It's a credibility issue for me. Co-affiant asked the male for identification and provided the officers a New Jersey driver's license bearing the name Mark Rosario and a date of birth 7/21/1998. This was the big mistake that Luigi made. This was the big mistake that Luigi made. I'll talk about why, but we'll continue. Affiant took the license and ran the information through the dispatch center. Co-affiant asked the male if he had been to New York recently, and the male became quiet and started to shake. Additional units from the Altoona Police Department arrived on scene to assist affiant and co-affiant in identifying the male. So they're setting this up as a consciousness of guilt. He got scared because he knew he'd been caught. He became quiet and started to shake. But the problem again is that this entire incident it's recorded on body cam. So those kinds of claims are going to be able to be verified. And while we haven't seen the body cam for ourselves at this point in time, there have been some pretty detailed descriptions of the body cam footage in these motions to suppress that we're going to talk about next time. And it's not real clear to me that they support this characterization of what happened, that he became quiet and started to shake. At this time, dispatch was unable to find any information on NCIC with the information provided by officers. This is why this was a big mistake. Okay. Giving the police the fake ID was a big mistake. Number one, because they're going to be able to know it's a fake ID. Police are not going to have any trouble searching. Like there's a variety of different databases that they have access to be able to search state issued identification, from other states. It's not a problem. And so if you're not in there, they're going to know. If you're in there or like the name is in there, but it doesn't match your description, they're going to know. So it's just like not only one of the easiest ways to get caught, giving the fake identification, but you've also now given them grounds to arrest you. You've given them a reason to arrest you because you gave them a fake ID, you provided false information to police, you obstructed. Not a good way. Not a good way to keep yourself out of jail. And the problem is once they have arrested you, then there's a lot of opportunity now to, as we'll see, start going through your stuff. And then things are only going to get worse and worse from this point on. So this is the critical mistake, because had Luigi Mangione just said, I'm Luigi Mangione, I'm from, wherever I'm from, identified himself as himself, they wouldn't have this basis. They might continue to have this suspicion that he's the guy in New York, but just, I think you're the guy in New York isn't gonna cut it. Like I visually recognize you as this person. That is not going to support an arrest. It might support a temporary detention to investigate, but you don't have to tell them anything. Remember, you have that right to remain silent. You don't have to say anything to police. And so you haven't given them probable cause to be able to arrest you. Very unlikely this is going to be probable cause to search, to get a warrant. So if you don't cooperate, with what they're asking you to do or provide, I'm not convinced that there is anything they could have done about it. Really not. So, yeah, this was the real critical mistake here. That was reason number one why. Of course, as we continue with the investigation, we'll see reason number two why this was a really bad idea. But he gave him the fake ID, and they were unable to find that person in the NCIC, and so that raises their suspicions. This is a false ID. Lieutenant Hanley arrived on scene and also ran the information the mail provided to officers, but still found that no record was able to be found. The mail was advised that he was under an official police investigation, and if he lied about his identity, he would get arrested. The mail then stated that his name was the defendant, Luigi Mangione, with a date of birth of 5/6/98. So now you have handed them the grounds for your arrest because you've admitted. You gave them a fake ID. You've admitted a crime, and now they get to arrest you and open up all of the consequences of being arrested that entails. The driver's license that the defendant provided to officers was found to be a fake identification card. This whatever PTLM is, Fox asked the defendant why he lied about his name, and the defendant replied, "I clearly shouldn't have." So it's another admission that he lied about the name by implication, because he's expressing regret for having done that, which implies knowledge that is in fact what you did. Lieutenant Hanley then instructed officers to place the defendant in custody for 4101A3 forgery and 4914A false identification to law enforcement. There's your grounds. You handed it to them. So now you get to be arrested. And what happens when you get to be arrested? When you get arrested? Let's continue. The defendant was placed into custody. The defendant was handcuffed and was searched on scene. You get searched incident to arrest when you're arrested. They get to go through anything that you have that is in your immediate possession that could potentially contain either a weapon, something dangerous, or evidence of a crime that if you got to it, you might be able to destroy it, and therefore they get to preserve it. So this is one of those exceptions to the Fourth Amendment, the warrant requirement. Search incident to arrest. That gets to happen. The defendant was then transported back to Altoona Police Department Station, where his property was inventoried pursuant to the Altoona Police Department's policy. Second grounds for a search when you get arrested, when they book you into jail and you have property that they're going to have to safe keep for you, they get to inventory it. And that's basically for their own liability purposes. If you go into jail and you have $10,000 in cash in your wallet, and when you get released from jail and they give you your wallet back and there's only $20 in it, that's a problem. And you have a significant claim against that police department. And so the inventory rule is intended to be that kind of liability protection. We document everything we have, everything you have when we take you into custody. And then that way we can verify that everything we give you back once you're no longer staying with us is the same stuff that you came in with. Is that always a 100% honest and above board procedure? Of course not, because it's not necessarily going to be that difficult to take something in or put something out, take something out or put something in before you do the inventory. If you're, inclined to be one of the cops that has a little less integrity about the process of what you're doing, but that's the general justification for it. So that's the justification that they're offering for why they went into his backpack. This is going to be real important when we get to the motions to suppress, because there are some serious concerns about this. So during a search of the defendant's backpack, officers located a black 3D printed pistol and a black silencer. 3D printed. Interesting, huh? It's a ghost gun. It doesn't have a registration number. It can't be traced. 3D printed. The pistol had a metal slide and a plastic handle with a metal threaded barrel. The pistol had one loaded Glock magazine with 6 9mm full metal jacket rounds. There was also one loose 9mm hollow point round. The silencer was also 3D printed. Lilith is going to join us now, and I don't know how good she's going to be. We're going to have to kind of wait and see. The defendant is being charged with 4103A3 forgery, firearms not to be carried without a license, tampering with records or identification, instruments of a crime, and false identification to law enforcement. The defendant will need to be fingerprinted and photographed. So that's the summary of what we get from Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania, isn't prosecuting him for the homicide. So they're not necessarily interested in what is the evidence that he shot and killed Brian Thompson. They're just interested in what's the evidence that he committed these Pennsylvania crimes at the time of his arrest. So limited information as far as tying him into the murder at this point. For that, we're going to need to turn first to New York. So this is the arrest warrant for when he was charged. You can see the different charges that were brought against him. And this sets forth the probable cause for them to get the arrest warrant to pick him up, basically from Pennsylvania. So the factual basis for the charges are as follows. They start right at the investigation and the early part of the investigation. I have reviewed surveillance video depicting the exterior of the Hilton at the above location, which is 1335 Avenue of the Americas. This is Midtown Manhattan. It's between Fifth Avenue, which runs up the east side of Central Park, and God, I forget what street runs up the west side. But this is kind of like in the middle, south of Central Park by several blocks. Specifically, a camera angle depicting 54th Street between 7th Avenue and Avenue of the Americas. In the surveillance footage at approximately 6:44 a.m., a man wearing a distinctive clothing outfit. We're told it's a distinctive clothing outfit, but not what it consists of, just that it's distinctive. Parentheses, the shooter approached Brian Thompson from behind, and then the shooter held what I recognize to be a firearm with a silencer attached at the end and fired it several times at Brian Thompson, causing him to collapse on the ground. Distinctive clothing gets me in part two, because remember how, bridge guy, part of the whole like suspicion of Richard Allen was that he had similar clothing in his closet. But the problem is that the clothing is so non-distinctive for rural Indiana. It's like a Carhartt jacket and blue jeans and, some like Tim's kind of boots. I mean, it could hardly be less distinctive. So when he tells me it's distinctive, like that's a characterization. I get that you're giving me a characterization, but I'm not interested in your characterization. I'm interested in the facts. What are those facts based on? If it's really a distinctive outfit, describe it. Describe it, because then it would be self-evident that it's distinctive. If it's like he was wearing a polka dot clown hat with a nose, yeah, that's going to be distinctive. That's not going to look like everybody else that's on the street. Oh, hey, we had some chaos. So, you could just tell me that, and then I would reach my own conclusion. Hey, that's distinctive. That guy's going to be really easy to trace. I buy it, but they don't. They just give me their conclusion. It's distinctive, and I'm supposed to take that on faith. I am informed by Detective. Before I continue, the other thing, of course, I wanted to mention here: firearm with a silencer, and that's important because, as we saw from the Pennsylvania case, they find firearm with a silencer in Luigi's backpack. So firearm with a silencer attached. I am informed by Detective Oscar Diaz of Manhattan South Homicide Squad that he was present for the autopsy of Brian Thompson and that the cause of Mr. Thompson's death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the torso. The defendant is the person shooting and killing Brian Thompson in the above described surveillance footage based upon evidence collected during the investigation, including, but not limited to, 1. Surveillance footage that I have reviewed from the HI New York City hostel at 891 Amsterdam Avenue, which depicts the same man wearing the same clothing leaving the hostel on December 4th, 2024 at about 5:34 a.m. So 891 Amsterdam is uptown. It's I want to say Upper West Side. It's, it's a little bit of a trek to get from there to Midtown. By New York standards, like New Yorkers walk a lot. I like going to New York because I like to walk and I like walking around the city, and it's a great city for that. But this is going to be quite a trek here. But the timing is right. But he's wearing the same clothing. Well, this is now where it gets to. You told me it was distinctive clothing, and the reason for that is because I need to be able to conclude that the person seen at the scene is the same person that's leading the hostel. If the clothing is distinctive, that will make it easy. But if the clothing is not distinctive, if there could potentially be lots and lots of people that are around in New York that are wearing this same or similar clothing, then we have a lot less confidence that you've successfully tracked the right person. You could have, if it's just somebody's wearing, I don't know, a dark blue parka over dark pants, there's probably a lot of people wearing similar outfits like that in New York on December the 4th. So you just have a much greater chance that, like, you walk somewhere where you're no longer in camera view. You turn a corner, you go into a building. I mean, anything like that, and potentially get confused with somebody else who's in the same vicinity wearing similar clothing. So this is just kind of a note, again, wearing the same clothing. How strong is that? Remains to be seen. But the timing is probably about right. 5:34. This is an hour and 10 minutes before the shooting took place. So we're in the right time frame to be able to get from this area to Midtown and conduct the shooting. Surveillance footage that I have reviewed from that same hostel that depicts the same man checking into the hostel on November 24th, 2024 at about 11:20 p.m. and showing a driver's license upon check-in. So again, now I'm kind of left to sort of take it for granted that this is in fact the same person. Like, how do you know that this is the same person? How did we get, this is a 10-day gap. Was he wearing the same distinctive clothing? He didn't tell us that. How do we know that this is the same person? That's just, it's not there. It's completely absent from this description. Is why are we to have confidence that this is in fact the same person? I have reviewed business records from the hostel that showed that the man provided a New Jersey driver's license with the name of Mark Rosario on it. Oh, there's reason number two. Reason number two why this was a really bad idea for Luigi Mangione to present this Mark Rosario fake ID to law enforcement in Pennsylvania. Because the person they are saying did the shooting presented the Mark Rosario ID to the hostel to check into the hostel. And so what do we get to infer from that? We get to infer from that Luigi was probably this guy that checked into the hostel on November 24th. Pretty good. Unless there's, like, I don't know, a ton of fake Mark Rosario IDs out there that all kinds of different people use. I don't know. Maybe there is. I could be convinced with evidence. Somebody's running a fake ID mill and you want a fake ID from this mill. Everybody gets a Mark Rosario. I mean, I could see it, but I need to see some evidence of that. That would be something that if the defense is going to want me to believe that, I'm going to probably need some indication that that's how things are. Circumstantially, you had the Mark Rosario ID in Pennsylvania when you were arrested. You had the Mark Rosario ID when you checked into the hotel on November 24th, 2024. It's you. Okay, it's you. We haven't necessarily closed that gap, however, between you checked into the hotel on November 24th, and you're the same guy that left on December 4th that they're watching on the security footage. So this is still, this is still not a closed circle as far as I'm concerned, but it does narrow the avenues of the defense, right? To be able to challenge, the conclusion that you are the person that committed the shooting. We are either going to have to concede that you checked into the hotel, you stayed at this hostel on November 24th at the same place as the shooter apparently did, that they tracked from December 4th, or there's lots of Mark Rosarios, and you might have some, way to be able to show me that that's the case. But it hems you in a little bit more. I think the natural conclusion is going to be, at the very least, you were at that hostel 10 days before Brian Thompson got shot. They think you're the same guy. They haven't shown me why yet, but they think that. I am informed by Detective Diaz that he is informed by Patrolman Tyler Fry. I love these levels of hearsay here. Of the Altoona Police Department, that on December 9th, 2024 at 9:58 a.m., defendant was taken into custody at the McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. That defendant presented a forged New Jersey driver's license with the name of Mark Rosario as his identification, which, based on the number on it, was the same identification defendant presented at the hostel. So yeah, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. If you are going to try to, if you shot the guy, just gonna entertain this hypothetical, okay? If you plotted to and shot this guy, and part of your plan was to do it, obscuring your identity to make it more difficult for you to be caught, don't use that identity repeatedly. Certainly do not give it to police when they're coming up to tell you, we think you're suspicious. We think you're suspicious, and so you use the ID that was supposed to be your cover, your protection. This was just a terrible call, not well thought out from a plotting and planning standpoint. Big mistake, because now you're stuck. At the very least, you checked into this hotel, you have the same ID. But it's a little bit more than that, because of course they also found a semi-automatic pistol with what appears to be a 3D printed loaded receiver with a metal slide and silencer, and written admissions about the crime. This is the first we're hearing about that. We didn't hear about that from the Pennsylvania report. And this is a little bit of an issue, written admissions about the crime. The reason why is because we've already talked about some of the exceptions to the warrant requirement that might apply in this particular situation. When you are arrested for a crime, they get to search you incident to arrest. They get to do an inventory search when they book you into jail. But those are not like free for all. We get to do anything and everything we want. The search still has to be tailored to the justification that supports it. And so with the search incident to arrest, we need to make sure that there isn't evidence of a crime that you could dispose of easily if you were able to get a hold of this. You struggle and you get out of the cuffs and you grab the thing and you swallow the drugs or whatever, stuff like that happens, or that there's a weapon in here that you might be able to access and do something bad with. So that's the search incident to arrest justification. Inventory, like I talked about, It's just to keep track of what you have so that by the time you get out of jail, we can go through and document, okay, came in with wallet, here's the wallet, came in with shoes, here's the shoes. It's just an inventory of what you have. None of these really provide a justification to be going in and reading what is written in a notebook. It doesn't really provide a justification to go in and read the notebook. You would in an inventory search just document. There's a notebook here, one red notebook. Like that's it. You might do one of like, these things. You like that, shake it, make sure there's nothing hidden in it. But otherwise, all that matters for inventory purposes is it's a notebook. And you got a slightly better argument. You got a slightly better argument on the search incident to arrest. Might be evidence. But it's just very tenuous. It's very tenuous. You're not going to be using a notebook to effectuate your escape. You're not going to bludgeon somebody with your notebook. It's not a weapon. It's not like a little bindle of something that you can toss or you can swallow or something like that. Like, are you going to eat an entire notebook? No, you're not. You're not. So it's a very, very slim justification to be reading the notebook without having a warrant for it. The cats over here, I have this little side table that I stack some like papers and notes on and stuff, and they sent it flying, and so now there's paper everywhere, and I don't know if you can hear all the crinkling, but this is life with 5 kittens. It is what it is. So that's now the outline that we get from New York State. That was the basic justification. Distinctive clothing. We ID'd him at the hostel leaving. We ID'd him at the hostel checking in. He used the same Mark Rosario ID checking into the hostel that he also presented in Pennsylvania. So that's how we know that this is the same. This is the same guy, at the very least, the guy who checked into the hostel on November 24th. And by the way, he also had a 3D printed gun and silencer. Gun and silencer. It's a little distinctive. You don't often see a silencer in a gun crime. I've seen lots and lots and lots of gun crimes. I've never seen one with a silencer, not once. Not to say it doesn't ever happen, but it's just uncommon. It's uncommon. It's far more common that you see, somebody just has some cheap burner gun or some stolen gun or something like that, and files off the identification, the registration number, stuff like that. Abandons it maybe. I mean, you just don't often see a silencer in a crime. So that's circumstantial. That's what got him to the point. That's what got him to the point of arrest for the state case. The DA then gave a press conference and so made some statements. And the reason why I'm pulling this up is because, remember, like we talked about, this has been an issue. The public statements, the publicity has been an issue that the defense has raised repeatedly so far in the case. Questions about whether it's fair, whether what they're doing is ethical, whether it falls within the guidelines that attorneys are required to follow for making statements about pending cases. So we're going to take a look at this to maybe kind of get a flavor of whether there's any meat on those bones. So Mangione charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree. These are charges in the alternative, by the way. I didn't pull up the indictment. When we looked at the probable cause, that was the arrest warrant. So that's typically the decision that's, it doesn't necessarily correlate with what he's ultimately charged with. It's just what police are initially taking the position like this is what we think we can prove that you committed. So what happened is he got arrested on these kind of preliminary charges. They immediately convened a grand jury. They returned an indictment, and the indictment listed these other charges. So 1 count of murder in the first degree, that was the terrorism-based one, and 2 counts of murder in the second degree. These are charged in the alternative. So what it means is that he can't be convicted of all of them. They're basically like different ways of committing the same crime. Actually, as soon as I said that, I realized not 100% sure that he couldn't be convicted of multiples, because sometimes you can, but it typically requires a separate act. I don't know. Maybe I'll take a look at that in the indictment and do a little research first. But anyway, general idea, it's the same act. It's not, two murders or anything like that. It's all just different ways of committing the murder of Brian Thompson. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin L. Bragg Jr. and the New York City Police Department Commissioner Jessica S. Tisch today announced the indictment of Luigi Mangione, 26, for the murder of 50-year-old United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside of the Hilton Hotel in Midtown on December 4th, 2024. Mangione is charged in a New York State Supreme Court indictment with 1 count of murder in the first degree and furtherance of terrorism, 2 counts of murder in the second degree, one of which is charged as killing as an act of terrorism, 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, 4 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree, 1 count of criminal possession of a weapon in the fourth degree, and 1 count of criminal possession of a forged instrument in the second degree. Quote, "We allege that Luigi Mangione carried out the brazen, targeted, and fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan." So already starting off with we're hedging this by saying we allege, it's alleged. But we are also, being rather emotive and colorful in how we're describing it. Brazen, targeted. This type of premeditated, targeted gun violence cannot and will not be tolerated, and my office has been working day in and day out to bring the defendant to justice. Well, that doesn't sound like an allegation there, does it? They've been working day in and day out to bring the defendant to justice. I would be okay with this saying to bring the shooter to justice, because I think that is what you're trying to say. Somebody shot Brian Thompson, and we work day and night to bring that person to justice. But you've substituted that with this guy. You've assumed already that this guy, the defendant, is that shooter. And that's a problem because he's presumed innocent. He's presumed innocent. And part of your ethical responsibilities as a prosecutor making public statements about the case are to make sure that you honor the fact that he has that presumption of innocence, that there is a process to play out. There's a time and place for it. And you're not going out here to, wink, wink and nudge, nudge the prospective jury pool that look, we got the guy. Okay. You can just take it. We got the guy. You don't even have to worry. We got him. It's really not supposed to be that. Quote, "I want to extend my heartfelt prayers to Mr. Thompson's loved ones as they continue to grieve. This ongoing investigation is the product of an incredible partnership at all levels with the NYPD, and I want to thank Commissioner Tisch and the prosecutors and detectives who worked collaboratively to apprehend Mr. Mangione. He is now charged in a New York State Supreme Court indictment with 3 counts of murder and faces a maximum penalty of life in prison without parole." Again, these statements now are a little bit more rote, very common to, this is like a backslapping type of acknowledgement. We got to thank everybody who played a role in it. We offer our expression of condolences to the victims of the crime. And the fact that he is charged in an indictment and here's the maximum penalty, these are appropriate types of information to be providing. The problem I have, though, again, is just now how this whole statement is structured, because it's already been couched in the defendant is the shooter. We've worked day in and day out to bring the defendant to justice. You've barely started working on bringing the defendant to justice, and there is a lot of process left to bring the defendant to justice. So, got a little bit of an issue with that statement there. Quote, we have taken a significant step towards achieving justice for Brian Thompson and his family, stated NYPD Commissioner Jessica S. Tisch. Once again, this is not really giving him the presumption of innocence, is it? Because of course it's not justice for Brian Thompson to just arrest somebody, right? It presumes you've got the right guy. I don't love it. I don't love it. I applaud our dedicated NYPD investigators for their relentless work in identifying the suspect and their unwavering commitment to seeing this crucial case through to its resolution. Well, there's nothing alleged about that, is it? It's just they worked, they got the right guy. And I express my gratitude to the attorneys at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for their collaboration in bringing this case forward. Additionally, I extend my thanks to everyone who saw something, said something, and did something. This highlights the critical role of the public in the NYPD's public safety mission, and it is because of this that we have a murder suspect in custody today. Well, to your credit, you called him a suspect. But once again, this is just not this is mission accomplished kind of stuff. It's a lot of backslapping and it's mission accomplished. You don't need to worry about how we did it. We just did it. It's done, and you can stop worrying about what if that guy who shot Brian Thompson is still out on the loose. Don't love it. Don't love it. According to court documents and statements made on the record, Mangione arrived at Port Authority on a bus on November 24th, 2024, and checked into the High New York City hostel on the Upper West Side. So we're getting new information here from the press release. Now, they're saying statements made on the record, so maybe they're mining this from the court hearings that were held. But this is not the same stuff that was like publicly easily out there from the arrest warrant and the initial filings in the case. So filling in a little bit more gaps about some of the evidence that they had. So he arrived at Port Authority on a bus. How do they know that? How do they know that? They don't tell us how they know that. They don't tell us how they know it's Mangione and not just one of these, I don't know, distinctive clothing wearing people. Did he use his own identification to get the bus ticket? Is that how you know? Or did you like backtrace the person who checked in on November 24th all the way back to the bus stop? They don't tell us how they know it's the same person. Mangione used a fake New Jersey ID under the name Mark Rosario. Mangione extended his stay at the hospital multiple times. So we knew about the fake ID, but he extended his stay at the hospital, at the hostel. What does that mean? Did he originally check in for a certain amount of time and then like continued it? Is it just how the hostel works? Like hostels tend to be, pretty temporary kinds of places. It's sort of the nature of them. You don't necessarily like book a long stay like you might do with a normal hotel. Oftentimes, in a hostel, you're in like a dormitory type of accommodation. And so it's just like you go in and get your dorm bed. And then if you want to stay there another night, you let them know at, whatever time they're doing check-ins for that day, you get another, you get a dorm bed again. I don't know. It just, it would be helpful to know, because to the extent that they're alleging that this was a planned and plotted event, and, we'll learn more about the December 4th timing again when we get next to the federal probable cause. It's not really that consistent with a plotting and planning, because the date, the December 4th, that was a known date. It was known ahead of time that would have been the target date, and so extending your stay multiple times isn't necessarily consistent with, I'm going to New York so I can be here on this day 10 days down the road. On the morning of December 4th, Mangione left the hostel at 5:34 a.m. and traveled to Midtown using an e-bike. Also new information. Haven't heard anything yet about using an e-bike. So that raises some questions. Where did this e-bike come from? Is this one of those, like, public transport things that they have where you can just like check out a bike and like leave it at a stand somewhere else? They have that in Seattle with these scooters. I swear they're like the most obnoxious things ever. These public scooters. People just like go flying around on these things, and I'm not a fan. Just putting that out there. But in e-bike. What's the provenance of the e-bike? Is there a record associated with him getting the e-bike? Was it a rented e-bike? Did he just go and like buy an e-bike for his own use? Luigi Mangione, just by way of background, is a wealthy guy. He comes from a very wealthy family. And, so some reason to think, as we'll get into, that, he could have had the means to just go and buy an e-bike and have it and use it. So some provenance of the e-bike might be interesting to know. Did they just see him on it? Do they have a record associated with it? Between 5:52 a.m. and 6:45 a.m., Mangione walked near and around the Hilton Hotel. At approximately 6:15 a.m., he purchased a water bottle and granola bars at the Starbucks at 1290 6th Avenue. More new information. How do we know this? Is it just on video? Do we have records? When somebody buys something, there is a purchase record. Did he pay cash? Did he use a credit card? If he used a credit card, whose name is it in? Anything else in here that might help us kind of square the circle between the person that's been identified and that they're watching on the video, and that, for sake of argument, we'll assume it's all the same person, although I haven't heard why the clothing is distinctive, but we'll just assume it. But squaring that circle with that person being Luigi Mangione, because they are now telling me real specifically in this press release, it's Luigi. Not that it's alleged it's Luigi. It's Luigi. So he did these things. Between approximately 6:38 a.m. and 6:44 a.m., Mangione stood against a wall on the north side of West 54th Street across from the Hilton, fully masked with his hood up. At 6:45 a.m., Mangione crossed the street to the Hilton Hotel and, armed with a 9mm 3D printed ghost gun equipped with a silencer, approached Mr. Thompson from behind and shot him once in the back and once in the leg. This again, this is theory of the case. They're presenting it as if this is what they know happened, but this is their inference from the evidence. Their inference from the evidence is that it's Luigi who did this with the ghost gun that they found in the backpack in Pennsylvania. But they're telling us this like it's fact. I just have a little bit of a problem with that, because this is opening statement kind of stuff. This is theory of the case, telling the jury what you're going to conclude before I tell you, here's the evidence that it's based on that you're going to see that's going to lead you to this conclusion. This is opening statement kind of stuff. And it's not intended to be a persuasive exercise when you're issuing a press release. It's meant to just be informative of some basic facts. It's meant to calm public alarm. Something happens in downtown Manhattan. It's high profile. It's done out in the open. The person is on the loose. It's scary. The reason to do the press conference is to announce so that people can be assured we've got someone in custody. He's going to get entitled to the process, but we have acted. We have done our public safety task of identifying and arresting a suspect, and we are now delivering him over to the court process for the rest of the process to unfold. Like that's really what it's for. It's not meant to be like you're really tipping over the line, in my view, when you start turning into this persuasive exercise. You should believe us. You should believe us that we got it right. You should believe us that this is what happened. These are problematic statements, in my view. Mangione then fled northeast on 54th Street and took an e-bike uptown. He eventually got into a taxi and was dropped off at West 178th Street and Amsterdam Avenue and then fled the state. Again, how do we know this? Any kind of records associated with it? They don't fill this in for us at this point in time. Mr. Thompson was transported to Mount Sinai Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 7:12 a.m. 2 of the discarded shell casings had the words deny and depose written on them, and the word delay was written on a bullet, all found at the scene. New information. On December 9th, Mangione was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after being spotted at a local McDonald's. When he was arrested, police recovered a 9mm handgun with a 3D printed receiver, 2 ammunition magazines, multiple live cartridges, a homemade silencer, and the fake New Jersey ID used at the hostel. That's really the crux of the identification claim, isn't it? He's got a similar gun to what was used. And he had the same ID that was used at the hostel. So as long as the hostel guy is the same person who was the shooter, they got at least a confident enough for probable cause circumstantial identification case. The case is being prosecuted by all of these, specific people. Some more backslaps about who we're thinking. Defendant, Luigi, the charges, here are these charges. And now all the way down here at the very bottom. Little footnote. The charges contained in the indictment are merely allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. All factual recitations are derived from documents filed in court and statements made on the record in court. Here's the thing. When the prosecutor is making their own press release, when they're going to rely on statements made in open court to make their press release. Well, you have the power to kind of blend the court process with the PR, don't you? Because you can decide what do you want the public to know, and then you can just go say that in court. And then, it's this kind of self-serving way of cycling information into your public statement. Right? I just go into court and I give my opening statement. And then I go ahead and quote that in my press release. So it's this laundering of the argument that they're kind of relying on to keep them within the ethical parameters of what they're allowed to do. Because generally you can acknowledge things that happen in open court. Right? You can acknowledge facts. It's factual information. It's just that now you've muddied the waters by introducing the fact of what you said for persuasive purposes in court. And then, of course, you have to read all the way down to the bottom of this thing to even get to this little disclaimer. Isn't that typical? Isn't that typical? How many people stopped, right here? Because we already know it's Luigi. Okay, they already told us about the chart. How many people even, they stopped scrolling down once we got to the backslapping? Because nobody really cares about that. They just care about what are the allegations. So you're done right here. You might never even get to that. And then all you know is, Luigi did all these things. They're saying Luigi did all these things. Sounds like Luigi. So this is part of the problem. that the defense has identified that they're arguing is tainting the process and is making it not fair. And I will say, from a process standpoint, I don't necessarily disagree with that. This is not how prosecutors are supposed to be presenting their cases in the press. It's just kind of a trite thing to say. Just try your case in the court. Okay, you can announce that you've made an arrest, and you can announce that there have been charges filed. But this is really not intended to be a process of litigation, of presenting evidence. It's very one-sided, of course, because the defense doesn't have the ability to answer this at this point. So that's kind of part of the environment. I think part of what was going on in these early days that led to this, free Luigi type of attitude. That's, look, we're reading through this. I'm seeing, some holes in it. Maybe those holes will be filled, maybe they won't, but I'm just seeing them. You're telling me things that are conclusory instead of telling me what I would need to know to reach that conclusion for myself. You're just telling me the conclusion, the distinctive clothing, for example. Luigi did all these things. And so if I'm inclined to be skeptical of law enforcement, I'm going to notice those, and I'm going to be suspicious. I'm going to be suspicious of them, and I'm going to wonder, why are you not just giving me the facts? Why are you trying to mind control me to tell me what I'm supposed to be thinking about the case? And then I'm going to be looking at the decisions to present him publicly in a press release as though his guilt is a foregone conclusion. It's not something you need to worry yourself about. It's been covered. It's been taken care of. Look at all this stuff that he's done. And maybe be a little bit suspicious of why. Why are you needing to do that? If you got a good case, just try your case in court. Why do you need to go on this PR offensive to prejudice him ahead of time? But the thing is that multiple things can be true at the same time, right? This can be an unfair process, but they could also have Luigi dead to rights. I just want you to remember that. We're going to go ahead and turn to the federal complaint now. So this is the last kind of formal charging document that was released in these initial stages of the case. So it's the last thing that people kind of in the early days of forming their impression about what this case means and is it valid and so forth. This is the last thing that they had to rely on. And this is by far the most detailed. So written by Gary Cobb, special agent with the FBI. First, we go through these different charges that have been filed, and then we go into the basis for them. The murder of Brian Thompson. So the basis for my knowledge and for the foregoing charges are in part as follows. Now, I notice, again, both of them kind of use that disclaimer, and I understand it's because you're not presenting every single piece of information you got in the course of an investigation, because some of it isn't going to be useful, right? But it is also, then acknowledged to be cherry picked. And those things like I questioned about the tip that went to Pennsylvania. Was this a normal way that you handled tips? How many tips did you get from people that are like, I saw somebody that looks just like that guy who did that shooting? And how did you follow up with them? And is it consistent with all of that? They leave all that out because they didn't follow up on any other tips that led to an arrest. So they just focus on this one. But it just shows, I think, how there might be some context that could shed light on, were they acting appropriately? Was this a valid investigative step that they took? Was there some reason why they focused on this guy? It's just, it would help that, but they don't provide us that in this context of these charging documents, because they get to kind of cherry pick it out and be like, no, that stuff, didn't produce any viable leads. So we'll just pretend like it never happened. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and am assigned to the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force. I have been personally involved in the investigation of this matter. This affidavit is based on my conversations with other law enforcement officers, my examination of documents obtained through a court-authorized search warrant. First time we've heard about a search warrant in all of this. My review of documents prepared by others, security camera video, and my involvement in this investigation. Because this affidavit is being, hey, watch your claws, sweetie, is being submitted for the limited purpose of establishing probable cause, it does not include all of the facts that I have learned during the course of my investigation. Where the contents of the documents and the actions, statements, and conversations of others are reported herein, they are reported in substance and in part, except where otherwise indicated. So just a very big, watch your claws, honey. A very big disclaimer there that, I'm selecting. I'm not giving you the whole dump of what we did. I am selecting what I chose to put in here. And so, just kind of acknowledging that, so that they don't get accused of like leaving something out. Although the reality is that if they leave out something important, they're going to get accused of it anyway. Based on my participation in this investigation, my conversations with other law enforcement officers, and my review of documents prepared by others, and my review of security camera video, I have learned, among other things, the following. So now we're going to start to get some of the actual like visual documentation that they relied on. So much more detailed in this description of what transpired. Also, instead of starting from the standpoint of the investigation, with both of the two previous affidavits did, they start from the crime. So I tend to like that a little bit better myself. It just keeps things chronological. It makes it a little bit more sensible. On December 4th, 2024, at approximately 6:45 a.m., Brian Thompson, the victim, the chief executive officer of a nationwide health insurance company, Company One, was shot and killed by a masked assailant, the shooter, while walking on West 54th Street towards a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the Midtown Hotel, where a Company One investor conference was scheduled to begin at 8:00 a.m. This is why the December 4th, 2024 date was so important, because they're having United Healthcare is having their investor conference starting that morning at 8:00. And so the reason I pointed that out with the whole extending his stay at the hostel issue is that this would have been the target date. So why would you not go to New York already knowing that you're going to be here on this date if this was something that you had planned and plotted significantly ahead of time? Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it's just a little bit of a potential discrepancy that raises some questions for me. As discussed below, the shooter was later identified to be Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant. As discussed below. So they're going to walk us through how they get there. Security camera video showed the shooter, who was wearing a gray backpack, come from between two parked cars, walk up behind the victim, and shoot the victim in the leg and back outside of the Midtown Hotel's entrance on West 54th Street. The firearm the shooter used appeared to have a sound suppressing device or silencer attached to the front of its barrel. A still image from the security camera video of the shooting is provided below. So here we have the image. The reason why I think this is important is because this is the first time they're acknowledging that the silencer, the reason why they suspect a silencer was involved, isn't because there's anything in like the ballistics forensics or, sound witnesses reported, anything like that. It's based on how it looks, right? And so we can kind of see for ourselves, it looks like a long gun. It looks like a long gun. I don't really see anything that is a separate silencer distinct from what he's got in his hand, because the quality isn't very good. It's not a high quality, it's low light. So is that going to potentially raise some questions? Is this really a silencer? Is the defense maybe going to be able to identify like some other gun that's kind of shaped like this that isn't a silencer? Argue it was that? I don't know, but it's just a thing that I noticed when I read through this. Oh, so all those times they've been saying that Brian Thompson was shot with a gun that had a silencer attached, they really are just assuming that. They're concluding that, they're inferring that based on what it looks like from the security footage. So we can see for ourselves that's what it looks like. Certainly consistent with being a handgun with a silencer on it, but not sure that that's conclusive. Does that rule out it being something else? Not real sure about that. If I'm defense, I'm probably going to be investigating that. The gray backpack. There we see the gray backpack. That's going to be kind of important. Shape, we can see the shape. But now remember the distinctive clothing. Remember, we were told that there was distinctive clothing. And what I see here is a dark hoodie and dark pants. I see nothing distinctive about this whatsoever. Nothing at all. I would expect thousands of people to be all over New York in December in pretty much exactly this outfit. I don't see anything distinctive about this at all. So if I'm defense and I get that guy who wrote that affidavit from New York on the stand, and I want to poke at his credibility, I feel like I'm going to have something here. You said this was distinct. This is a black hoodie and dark colored pants. What on earth is supposed to be distinct about that? They're going to have the hours and hours of surveillance footage, the defense will, that the law enforcement collected as part of their canvas. And so they're going to be able to maybe watch through this footage and pick out how many people are in this footage over all these hours of time that are wearing a dark hoodie and dark pants. Distinctive. You better have an explanation for what made this distinctive. Because, so far, me looking at this, this is not it. This is not it. Now, the backpack looks a little bit distinctive, but it's also a little bit hard to tell. Like the shape looks a little bit distinctive. It's hard to tell what the color is because we have this color distortion from the lighting, right? We got all this blue light here, this red light, yellow light. It's dark out. It looks gray, and that looks kind of blue, and that looks kind of yellowish. I would think if I'm trying to trace this in a full light type of situation, I don't know if I'm going to know what color it is. I'm going to have to go by probably shape. That's just me, but look, you can just tell. You can tell from looking at this image that the lighting and the coloring is distorted. Law enforcement personnel who responded to the scene of the shooting recovered, among other items, spent 9mm shell casings and at least one round of live 9mm ammunition. Now, I'm pretty sure this is also the first time that anybody has mentioned the caliber of the rounds that were used in the shooting. Kind of an important thing if we're going to tie this to the gun that was found in Luigi's backpack, which they did tell us was 9mm. The words deny, delay, and depose were written on the side of some of the shell casings. This is going to that terrorism element, right? That this isn't like a personal vendetta. This isn't a crime of passion or something like that. This was message oriented. This is about communicating some type of message and using violence to achieve that. So even though it didn't satisfy the New York standard for what constitutes terrorism, uh, I feel pretty comfortable still looking at this as evidence of this being a political violence. This is political violence, kind of by definition. You used violence to try to send a message, a big picture message. What exactly that is not quite clear yet from these bullets. But if you're going to go like shoot some guy who was sleeping with your sister or something like that, you probably you're not going to like write something on the bullet. I don't know. Maybe you would, but it probably wouldn't be this. So just a little bit of information about why this was done. Responding law enforcement personnel also recovered a cell phone in the vicinity of the location where the shooting had occurred. That's very new information. We didn't hear that from any of these other sources. Recovered a cell phone in the vicinity of the location where the shooting had occurred. Did they see him drop it? Okay, question number one that I'm going to have when I'm when I'm defense reading through this. Okay, how do you know it's not just some random cell phone that some random person who happened to be in the neighborhood, or pulling their gloves out of their pocket and accidentally pull the phone out and it falls on the sidewalk and they lose it? Is there some connection between the cell phone and the shooter? You didn't tell me, so I'm going to wonder. Is this out of the blue? Do you have some way to link it to him? What do you know? However, you've got a cell phone, and cell phones are, of course, massive repositories of information. So much information from a cell phone, even a burner cell phone. Okay, if you were carefully using a burner cell phone just for like maybe limited research to plan this crime, you're not communicating with anybody, you're just maybe getting maps, you're maybe looking up dates of conferences, getting a picture of this guy so you're able to identify him, things like that, then maybe the cell phone isn't going to really be that helpful, other than just establishing the planning and preparation and so forth. It's risky because even burner cell phones, you can sometimes trace where they came from. Where'd you buy it? The cell phone, it's got the IMEI, the identification, the individual identification, that can be traced to the point of purchase. The point of purchase may have a record for it, so they might be able to find out who bought that burner phone. It's not a guarantee. But if it's not a burner phone, or if it's a phone that you used for multiple purposes while you're on this mission and you did other personal related things with it, they're going to know all of it. They're going to know all of it. They're going to know who you called. They're going to be able to contact that person, be like, who called you on this day? Who'd you talk to from this number from New York? They're going to be able to tie that together. Oh, you called your college roommate. Oh, you called your mom. They're going to have that. And then obviously, if this is your personal cell phone, this is game over. This is potentially, anyway, this is potentially game over, because one, they're going to be able to identify that it's yours. You are associated with the account. You have the activity that's part of the normal life, normal patterns of life, kinds of things that they look for when they do a big cell phone extraction. Who do you normally talk to? What sort of activities do you have a history of engaging in? Is all this stuff consistent with it? It just goes to help establish the provenance of the phone, right? Because yeah, phones can be stolen. Phones can be stolen. But you're going to typically see like a big change of pattern if something like that happens, let alone, obviously just cutting off service or, like why I'm not going to, if my cell phone gets stolen, I'm going to like I'm not going to pay a bill to keep that phone operating. I'm going to call my provider and cancel it. Maybe make a maybe make a police report. I guess it just depends on how good of a phone it is. I do love my phone. I got my phone specifically for the camera when I went down to Chile last winter. The first time I went, I took my big DSLR camera, and it's fine, but it's just like it's a big bulky thing to carry around. And boy, being able to take good pictures with a cell phone is like a level up. So I might report my phone to the police if somebody stole it. But chances are, if I don't have my phone, somebody didn't steal it. I dropped it somewhere. I did that thing of the pulling the gloves out of the pocket and it fell on the ground. Like I did that. I did that at Iron Man last year when my girl Heidi, she was finishing, and I was down at the finish line. It's a huge crowd, taking photos and stuff like that. And then just like at some point, boom, like my phone's gone. No idea. Some awesome person turned it into the lost and found, so I was able to get it back. But yeah, that kind of thing happens all the time. What if somebody hadn't turned it in and they had taken it and they had gone to New York and shot a healthcare worker with it? Well, if I had those witnesses that I talked to at the race about how my phone went missing, if I had my contacting the ISP to be like, you don't need to continue providing service to this phone, I switch over service to a new phone because I get a new phone, these things are all going to support my claim that it wasn't me that did the shooting. So if those things aren't there, then a little more of a stronger inference that I didn't lose my phone after all. So this is a really important piece of information because if they can tie the cell phone to Luigi Mangione, it means they can place him in the vicinity of the shooting. And now that's going to strongly increase the inferential power of the identification, that the person that we're watching on these videos, that the person who checked in on November 24th is the same person who was downtown at this area. The person who checked in on November 24th used the Mark Rosario ID that Luigi Mangione had in his possession in Pennsylvania. And he used a gun that looks an awful lot like the one that was in Luigi's backpack. So this cell phone right here, as soon as I see that as a defense attorney, I am going alert, alert, alert. This is critical. Critical evidence, potentially make or break the case evidence. Potentially make or break the case. The investigation. Based on my participation in this investigation, my conversations with other law enforcement officers, my examination of documents obtained through a court-authorized search warrant, my review of documents prepared by others, and my review of security camera video, I know that over the course of the next several days, investigators retrieved and reviewed hundreds of hours of recordings from nearby security cameras to track the shooter's movements both before and after the murder. Video canvas in a place like New York, okay, one of like the most dense Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, one of the most dense areas in the urban United States. There's going to be so many cameras. So many cameras. All the businesses that have security cameras. I don't know if they use flock cameras in New York, stoplight cameras, those types of things. I just imagine there's going to be massive density compared to, committing your crime in a more rural environment or a small town or something like that. Starbucks, are they going to have a security camera? Almost certainly. Hilton security camera, almost certainly. Like so many of these places in this area are going to have security footage. And the reason that's important is because a lot of times when they're doing this type of work with a canvas and they're trying to trace the movements, one of the challenges they have is gaps in the camera footage. And so we have to go from where we last see somebody and be able to connect that with a non-contiguous piece of footage from a different location and be able to say this is the same person. So I understand now why the New York person is probably saying distinctive clothing, because I imagine even in New York, they may have had to fill in some of those gaps. And so they want to like reassure me that it's totally fine because we can tell by what he's wearing. Well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. You're going to have to show that at some point. And the jury has their own eyeballs. They'll be able to make that determination for themselves. Does that look like the same person? Does it look like the same clothing? Are they walking with the same kind of pattern, gait pattern? Are they going in the direction that they should be going in? Are they behaving in a way that they should be behaving in? But in New York City, Midtown Manhattan, I wouldn't expect there to be an awful lot of those gaps. I really wouldn't. Very similar to like the cell phone coverage, the tower location and the location data in particular that you can get from that. It's going to be so much more dense somewhere like downtown Manhattan than it is out in, I don't know, rural Moscow, Idaho, outside of Moscow, Idaho. On the way to Wawawi Park, where you have no cell phone signal. You have no signal. So these are just all potential avenues that law enforcement is going to have to, again, kind of close that circle, fill in some of those gaps about why are we making the conclusion that this person on video, these other people on video, that they're all the same person and that person is Luigi Mangione. You're going to be able to overlap some of that with video tracking. You're going to be able to overlap some of that with potentially with location data also. Although if they got the phone at the scene, who knows what's in it? What would not be in it if it's Luigi's phone is tracking back to the hostel, right? Just kind of by definition. But if they have, for example, data from the cell phone, if it's Luigi's cell phone and it shows, movements around the city, maybe like some casing work kind of thing, and they can line that up with video footage on these other occasions, very strongly increase the inferential value of that data. So from that review, investigators were able to formulate the following timeline of the shooter's movements from November 24th, 2024 up to and including December 4th, 2024. Now, again, this is a 10-day period, kind of a long time. And so they don't necessarily tell us much about a lot of the in-between and what was going on. And that's maybe not critical, but it could be potentially helpful to know, why this 10-day gap? Why this 10-day gap? On November 24th, 2024, at approximately 10:11 p.m., the shooter arrived in New York City on an intercity bus at the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan. The bus originated in Atlanta, Georgia. The shooter took a taxi to the area around the Midtown Hotel and stayed in the area for approximately 1 hour before taking another taxi to a hostel located in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Taxis are things there are records of. Bus tickets are things there are records of. Now, he might be doing all this in cash. You'd think sort of a basic precaution one would normally take would be to do something in cash. But I'm going to wonder about that. What do the records show? And again, how do we know that this is the shooter arriving at this time on this particular bus? How do we know that? How do we identify him? They just tell us, but they don't tell us how. So that's a gap I'm going to have questions about. The shooter registered at the hostel under the name Mark Rosario and provided a false New Jersey driver's license as a form of identification. The false New Jersey ID. A photograph of the false New Jersey ID is provided below. And here we see Luigi's picture on the New Jersey driver's license with the name Mark Rosario. Now, my question about this is, where did this photo come from? Because where this photo comes from seems to me to be pretty important in terms of the conclusion I'm supposed to draw from it. Because if this photo just came from Luigi's arrest, then we still haven't closed the door on the possibility that, like, maybe there's just some fake ID mill out there that will send any person, any man who wants a fake ID, the name Mark Rosario. It's a non-existent person. They just use it like that. But if this photograph came from the hostel, if they documented his identification, well, that's a much, much stronger inference then, isn't it? That it was Luigi who was Mark Rosario, and that there's no, mistake about the fake ID. I will tell you, I strongly suspect that this is from the arrest in Pennsylvania. This is not something that the hotel took a picture of, because hotels don't do that. They don't do that. When was the last time you checked into a hotel? Yeah, you have to provide your identification, but have they ever once taken a photograph of it? I have never once had a hotel take a photograph of my identification. It's just to verify who you are and that you correspond with the registration information. So this to me is potentially a little bit misleading, because we know that their assumption is that they're the same ID. But I'm not sure we know that 100% for certain. Would they maybe be able to, let's say this is the ID that was recovered from New Jersey, they could go to the hostel. They could interview the person who was working the desk when he checked in, see if they recognize it. That would help. So that little bit of a link between this specific driver's license with Luigi's picture on it, it's incriminating, but it's not complete. There needs to be a little bit more to close that. When the shooter was checking in at the hostel, the desk clerk asked the shooter to remove his mask, which he did, revealing his face to a security camera as shown below. So here are those images that were out there that we first saw of the shooter when they were the Crime Stoppers photo, when they were asking for tips, help us find this person. This is what was out there. And so you can see it's this very, very high upper angle that you don't normally see people from this angle, like unless you're extremely tall and they're extremely short. So it's not going to look the same as just a face-to-face encounter of somebody on the street. I bring this up because I know when Luigi was first arrested, that was kind of one of the points of the discourse around it was, well, he doesn't look anything like that guy in the photos. Well, I don't know, because we didn't see Luigi from this angle. We didn't really see him from the same. We saw him face on in that perp walk, and no, face on, maybe even slightly below from the perp walk. He's not going to look the same as he does in these particular, images anyway. There was some question about, is this even the same guy? Is it even the same guy? It's kind of the challenge of trying to rely on your own eyes. Eyes can be deceiving. Eyes can be deceiving. And we have this idea of photographs as being sort of fixed and objective representations of reality. And they really aren't at all. So much variability that you get depending on lighting, depending on angle, depending on lens length, depending on aperture. A lot of different things that can affect what a person looks like. Same person in different photos can look quite a bit different. If you're interested in that at all, I don't have anything available to look at, but you can just like Google the effect of different focal lengths. Like people, there are like, examples out there that people have put together where you do like a portrait of somebody and you take a portrait of them with a really short lens, really wide angle lens, and the effect that has on the perspective, and then take them with a longer lens. And it's very, very different. Same person can look extremely different. They're both a camera, they're both a photograph, but the perspective that you get is dramatically different. So a lot of that stuff can be affected by cameras, and it makes it tricky to rely on cameras to be 100% sure that we've got the same person. So that's why I think in this particular case, the camera footage is maybe unlikely to even be that significant, because if you're going to have stronger pieces of inferential information to be able to tie together to make your case, you don't actually have to rely on the eye test stuff. Like, that's how you conducted your investigation. That's what got you to the conclusion. But if you got Luigi Mangione's cell phone at the scene, and if you got, his ID with the name that was used by the guy in the hostel, like, these things are going to be stronger pieces of evidence than just, well, it looks like the same guy on the camera, because these are much more objective than visual similarity. Other than this interaction with the desk clerk, the shooter consistently kept his mask on throughout his time in New York, including while inside the hostel. So 2 things with that. One, obviously, they're using it to try to show that he was attempting to conceal his identity. He didn't want to be recognized. He didn't want to be identified. He didn't want to be caught on camera. He wanted to make it as difficult as possible to identify himself. But also, this consistently kept his mask on throughout his time in New York suggests they watched him throughout this 10-day gap. They have had the ability to trace him over the course of this 10 days. We don't see that. They don't tell us anything really about that at this point, but that is just something that's kind of lurking in the background as far as potential evidence that they have. So then we jump to December 4th, 2024. 10 days happen. What's going on? No idea. No information about it. On December 4, 2024, at approximately 5:35 a.m., the shooter left the hostel wearing the gray backpack and rode an electric bicycle down Central Park West to a location near the Midtown Hotel, as shown below. So now we have a little bit, I think, better view of the backpack. It doesn't have that light distortion quite as much. When we first saw the backpack, it looked like the top flap was a different color than the rest of the backpack. This one looks much more like it's all the same. It does have that same shape, though. I see that. He's got something in his hand here. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. It's not the bike. What's that thing in his hand? It's strange looking. And then there is, right, the distinctive clothing. Black hoodie, black pants, black shoes with a white sole. It's John O'Keefe's shoes. That's the distinctive clothing, I guess. Now, one thing that may be working in their favor is look at how empty these streets are. Okay, this is pretty early, like even by New York standards, where, the city never really sleeps. It doesn't mean that there is a whole lot of hustle and bustle going on at all points in time, and they are still normally diurnal humans for the most part. There's not as many people out and about at this time of day. And so that is going to cut in favor of them being able to track his movements, right? It's harder to lose him in a crowd if there's no crowd. At approximately 5:41 a.m., the shooter walked around the area of the Midtown Hotel and at one point purchased items from a nearby coffee shop. We heard about that from the Starbucks. They said it was a bottle of water and some granola bars. The shooter then returned to a bench in the vicinity of the Midtown Hotel. On at least one occasion prior to the murder, the shooter was depicted using a cell phone. So now we have this link back to the cell phone that was found at the scene. I'm going to want to know, as defense lawyer, anything in that cell phone that links with Luigi Mangione, because if it does, frankly, pardon my language, we're fucked. That's real bad. That's real bad. At approximately 6:45 a.m., after waiting near the Midtown Hotel for approximately an hour, the shooter saw and approached the victim, shot the victim multiple times, and then fled on foot to West 55th Street, where the shooter mounted the electric bicycle and rode towards Central Park. So now again, I guess we have the same e-bike. Was it a different e-bike? I mean, he says the electric bicycle. It implies it's the same e-bike. So did he just have it stashed somewhere? If this is one of those like city rent a bike types of things, I mean, is that normal? Is that consistent? Would you expect it to just sit out on the sidewalk, or would somebody like at some point return it to the stand it belongs at? I don't know. It's just a kind of a question. The ability to stash an electric bicycle. Where was it during this time period? You know, bikes get stolen like a lot really easily. Just a question. So he rode towards Central Park after disappearing inside the park for a period of time. This is important because, yeah, Central Park is big, it's massive, and it's going to be the one like largest part of the city where you're gonna have camera gaps. Like you can get pretty lost in some parts of Central Park. You know, some parts are again heavily populated, a lot of walkways and structures and fountains and a zoo and all kinds of stuff. But there are also some very, very hidden little trails and gardens. There's the duck pond. You can get lost around. The duck pond was kind of famous as the site of the Central Park Five. Who didn't do it, but where that particular crime occurred. It's very, very well hidden. So that would be a good place to go if you wanted to hide and get lost and get away from cameras. You'd go into Central Park. After disappearing inside the park for a period of time, how long, they don't say, the shooter was captured on video again exiting the park near West 77th Street and Central Park West, riding north on Central Park West. Do they have like a proposed route or like options for how he may have been able to go through the park from this entrance and this exit point? There are different trail systems and paths and so forth through the park. So just something to be curious about. When he emerged from the park, the shooter was no longer carrying the gray backpack, as shown below. So that's interesting, right? Here he is riding West 55th. That's when he first left. He's got the backpack. And now here he is. I guess it's the same guy because it's kind of hard to tell because the clothing is really not that distinctive. But it's a guy in a dark hoodie, dark pants, those John O'Keefe shoes with the black shoes with the white sole, on a bike. That was another thing I wondered about too. If this is like one of those city e-bikes, does it have a location? Does it have location tracking? on it? I don't know. But I would wonder, because it would help, in terms of being able to be sure that this guy with the backpack on this bike is the same person as this guy without the backpack on this bike. The backpack is gone. And that's a little suspicious to me, because Luigi is arrested in Pennsylvania with a backpack. Now, I'm not saying it's the same backpack, but it's just, if you ditch the backpack, where's your gun? What did you even have in this backpack that you needed to bring if not the gun? And so if you ditch the backpack, did you ditch the gun? Did you put the gun somewhere else? Where is the gun? This is not like an impossible problem, but it's just a little bit strange, right? It's just a little bit strange. I would assume that's why you're taking a backpack to the crime, is so that you don't have your gun like out in the open. You don't have it stuck in your pants where it might fall out while you're riding your bike. Maybe you got an interior pocket. Maybe you got, somewhere else that you can stash it that's secure. It's not going to interfere with your movement or something like that. But if you do, then why didn't you just use that in the first place instead of wearing this backpack that's going to be traceable? I don't know, but it's a little strange. At approximately 6:58 a.m., security footage captured the shooter riding the electric bicycle near West 85th Street and Columbus Avenue. So they saw him exit at West 77th. It seems like maybe there's a gap between West 77th and West 85th. No cameras there? Don't know. Notice it's a lot lighter now. You watch it from being fairly dark, pretty dark. This is real dark when he left the hostel. We saw at the shooting, it was still fairly dark, but now it's starting to get lighter. And by the time he's coming out of the park, it's quite a bit lighter. 2 minutes later, at approximately 7:00 a.m., the shooter was captured on video walking near West 86th Street and Columbus Avenue without the electric bicycle. Okay, so at some point he ditched the bike. Seems like they don't see him on camera ditching the bike or know what he did with the bike. Is there a way to trace what happened with the bike? At approximately 7:04 a.m., the shooter entered a taxi that drove him to the George Washington Bridge bus terminal in the vicinity of West 179th Street and Fort Washington Avenue in Upper Manhattan. The shooter's face was captured by a camera in the taxi as shown below. So now we have a much more normal perspective. We have a much more normal elevation that we would be looking at somebody from a face-to-face, kind of setting. It's not this way high overhead from a security video. This is pretty straight on. Does it look like Luigi? Does it not look like Luigi? It's one of those things. Of course, only thing that matters is going to be what the jury thinks. But we've talked about before the problems with cameras and images and the ability to project your expectations onto them. Basically, if you want this to look like Luigi, it looks like Luigi. If you want it to not look like Luigi, it doesn't look like Luigi. It's a guy who's in the right age, looks like he's in the kind of right age range, got the eyebrows, the eyes, but of course can't see much. Can't see much because of the mask. It's certainly consistent with Luigi. I think that's pretty fair to say. Hey, bud, don't scratch up my foot. Again, we have another taxi. Do we have a taxi record? Do we have a fare? How was the fare paid? Was it paid cash? Was it paid card? I'm not sure about New York. I feel like It's hard for me to say because I haven't even tried to use cash in a taxi for a long time, because everything is card now. But last time I was in LA, I took a taxi. Last time I was in Las Vegas, I took a taxi. I don't think you even can pay cash anymore because they don't want their drivers carrying cash. You get robbed if you have cash. Now this guy's got, quite a setup here as far as being, pretty well protected from somebody back in the passenger compartment. Uh, but it makes me wonder, is paying cash even an option in these taxis now? I don't know. I haven't been to New York in quite a few years. Opens up the question of what sort of record they may be able to have of this particular fare. All right, bud. Come on up here and get comfortable. Get cozy. You don't need to bite me. There you go. At approximately 7:30 a.m., video footage from the George Washington Bridge bus terminal captured the shooter entering the facility. No video footage showed the shooter leaving the bus terminal, suggesting that the shooter left New York City. Without the backpack, right? They didn't trace him back to get the backpack, so whatever was in the backpack was left there. I think that's sort of important. Given that Luigi was arrested with a backpack, and that the backpack he was arrested with allegedly contains not just a laptop. I mean, you can get a new laptop, especially if you're a rich guy, but the notebook. The notebook. The notebook is, we're going to hear about it more when we get into the motions to suppress, but the notebook is supposedly what contains his diary. It sets out, the planning, the thought process. So it took place over time. And unless it's something that like he fabricated after the fact in Pennsylvania to make himself look like he was the shooter, it seems pretty improbable and irrational, not the kind of thing someone would do. Let me create a fake journal to make it look like I was the shooter, even though I'm really not. Then he brought the journal with him. So now we have another thing besides the gun, that it wasn't in the backpack, right? If he had it with him in Pennsylvania, it wasn't in the gray backpack. He didn't go back to the hostel to pick it up. Where was it? Where was it? Where did he have all this? Did he have it stuffed in his pants and his clothes? Did he maybe have a locker in the bus terminal? Sometimes, they have a locker where you can store a bag, store a backpack, something like that. That's something I would be looking at from an investigative standpoint. We have his movements for the last 10 days, apparently. Ever track him back to the bus station? Stashes his backpack with his stuff there. So then he would have it when he got off the bus, ultimately in Pennsylvania. I don't know, but it's a real big question for me because, the provenance of the notebook and the gun, they're fairly significant. And so where were they? Where were they? I mean, again, it's not impossible, of course. Just because you have a backpack doesn't mean you had to keep, everything in the backpack. Doesn't mean there's nowhere else to carry stuff. But it just does raise a question. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. If you didn't need the backpack, then why did you have the backpack in the first place? And lo and behold, on or about December 6, 2024, law enforcement officers searching Central Park found a gray backpack matching the appearance of the gray backpack worn by the shooter, as depicted below. It certainly looks like there's stuff in that backpack, doesn't it? Unless it's like got an internal frame, but even if it's got an internal frame, like it looks like it's full. It's got some things in it. So 2 days later after the shooting, they find the gray backpack. You can just see the ground. This is not on a path. This does look like one of the more remote areas, one of the more remote trails in the park, maybe around the duck pond, maybe around Strawberry Fields, like could be a few different places. So they found the backpack. They know what's in the backpack, but they don't tell us. They don't tell us. Just a weird piece of the story here. The arrest and identification of the shooter. Based on my participation in this investigation, my conversations with other law enforcement officers, et cetera, I know, among other things. On December 9th, 2024, at approximately 9:14 a.m., a worker at a fast food restaurant in Altoona, Pennsylvania, called the police about a male customer later identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant, who the worker believed resembled photos of the shooter that had been broadcast in the media following the victim's murders. Now we know it's a McDonald's employee telling us real specifically who called in that tip. So the employee saw him, thought it looks like that person, called it in. There will be a record of that call, right? There will be a record of that call that can be produced. So if there's any question about, did that call actually take place? That would be verifiable. If I'm the defense, I'm looking for it. If they don't have it, it's going to raise questions. If they do have it, then problem solved. Members of the Altoona Police Department responded and encountered Mangione, who they also believed matched the appearance of the shooter. So now we've come off from immediately recognized him, right? I knew right away it was the same guy. No, they're like, yeah, it looks like him. This is a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more moderate, a little bit more believable. Yeah, it looks like him. When approached by responding officers and asked for identification, Mangione offered the false New Jersey ID used by the shooter to check into the hostel. Again, might be a strong inference, but it's the same one. But I don't know if we have 100% certainty that that's the case. It's just consistent with the same ID. The actual, one, was it the same? Don't know for sure. Seems like, not a bad inference. It's just not rock solid, right? Mangione was later found to be in possession of a loaded 9mm pistol and silencer consistent with the weapon used to kill the victim. So we know 9mm is consistent. We see here the gun, the silencer. Did they, looks like it would look like the gun that was seen in the security camera at the time of the shooting. But they don't show us, the gun with the silencer attached. They'll do that at trial, I would expect, but just to make sure that it is in fact like visually consistent. Mangione was later found to be in possession of a loaded 9mm pistol. Yeah, we said that. So they skip over how he came to be found to be in possession of it. They're not getting into that. The feds are not getting into the circumstances of the search in their own pleadings. Just, we're not going to go on record about any of that right now. We're not going to say how, we're not going to say when, we're not going to say warrant or no warrant. We're not going to say what any type of justification was. We're going to skip over all of that, not give anything away, not pin ourselves down to a theory. And it's a little bit of a hint that they may be concerned about that as well. They may be concerned about that search. If it's a real clear search incident to arrest, you just say that, Pursuant to a search incident to arrest, we found, because you're going to go into court, you're going to stand on that, you're going to be able to substantiate that, and it's going to be found to be justified. So when you don't say that, to me, that signals you got a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of insecurity about your grounds for doing that search. So they found the pistol, clothing that matched apparel that the shooter wore in the security camera videos, a notebook, several $1,000s in cash. Again, this is going back to Luigi being a rich kid and potentially having the resources to buy an e-bike, do lots of this stuff in cash, buy himself a new laptop if he needed to. He had several $1,000s in cash. an envelope associated with an FDIC insured bank, and a letter addressed to the feds. The feds letter. So this didn't get mentioned before, right? This is not the notebook. The notebook is a separate thing. The feds letter is different from the notebook. So nobody mentioned before the feds letter, nor did they mention at any point, how do we know, what the fed letter says? Like, what was our basis for reading the feds letter? Did they get a warrant and read it later? Or did they go through and read it at the scene? We don't know. Pennsylvania didn't mention it. Again, if it's a search incident to arrest, a little bit, tenuous as far as the justification for doing that. The 9mm pistol and silencer were later tested and found to be operable by a ballistics examiner from the New York City Police Department. That's important because that means they're going to be able to do comparison. Right? They're going to be able to compare the rounds that are shot, the casings, the bullet rifling, all of that stuff. They're going to be able to compare that with a bullet that they recovered from Brian Thompson. If they recovered bullet from Brian Thompson, they're going to be able to compare it to the spent shell casings at the scene. So don't tell us yet that they've done that or what the results are, but that is very much going to be on the horizon and part of the case that they're presenting. Photographs of the firearm and the silencer recovered from Mangione are depicted below. So there we see that in its nice little gun box that they use when they take a gun into evidence. See, looks like a little wallet there, maybe. It's kind of hard to tell. Then there's this little paper bindle kind of thing. The notebook contains several handwritten pages that express hostility towards the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. For example, the notebook contained the following statements and entries that appear to correspond to particular dates. So again, this is going to be circumstantial, linking Luigi Mangione, who had this notebook, with the shooter who shot the healthcare executive and wrote message words on the bullets and the casings that were found at the scene. But still a little bit of a question about what are you doing reading this notebook? How did you find out that this is what it said? This is less likely to be a potential problem in the federal court, in my view, than it is in state court. And the reason why is because in the federal court, the federal jurisprudence, the police can pretty much cure any constitutional violation after the fact by just going and getting a warrant. If you didn't have the warrant at the time and you looked at it and you went, oh shit, I should have got a warrant for this, then you can just go get a warrant. You can't rely on what you improperly learned. But if you can get a warrant based on what you knew prior to you violating the person's privacy rights, federal courts will say it's independent source, it's inevitable discovery, you would have found it anyway, no harm, no foul. State court might be a little bit of a different situation. So in an entry marked as 8/15, August 15, 2024, the notebook described how the details are finally coming together, and I'm glad, in a way, that I've procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about acronym for Company One. The notebook entry also stated that the target is insurance because it checks every box. So now we're getting into proof of planning and preparation, as well as the motivation for committing the crime. In an entry marked as 10/22, October 22nd, the notebook stated 1.5 months. This investor conference is a true windfall. And most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. The investor conference in 1.5 months from 10/22 is, right about December 4th. So now we circle back to the activity at the hostel and the fact that the December 4th was a known date well ahead of time. And so the whole extending the stay in the hostel, getting there 10 days early, extending the stay, what is this about? Is this going to be presented as some sort of effort at concealing what's really going on and what he's doing in New York? Uh, I'm not quite sure. Is this just normal how the hostel works because it's kind of by nature a short-term accommodation? I don't know, but certainly the timing adds up, the event adds up. Later on in the entry, the notebook describes an intent to whack the CEO of one of the insurance companies at its investor conference. As described above, October 22nd, 2024 was approximately 6 weeks before the date of the murder of the victim, which occurred on the date of Company One's investor conference. So yeah, these things all tie together. They show intent. So if there is provenance to this notebook, okay, then this is not helpful. This is definitely not helpful to Luigi. So one of the questions is going to be, did they make it up? Did somebody plant this notebook on Luigi? It's always hard to prove a negative, right? It's hard to prove that they didn't do it. But we already know there's body cam footage of the arrest. So we should see the circumstances of them approaching, them opening, what they found. That should be there. And if it's not there, that's going to be sus. It's going to be sus if that body cam is missing. There should be some way to document the process of finding and taking into custody and securing, right? This is a chain of custody. Every law enforcement officer across the country knows how to do, even there in Massachusetts. They really do know how to do it. So it's going to come down to, did they follow that? Did they document it? And if they didn't, potentially raises questions. Does that mean a jury is going to buy that it's planted? I doubt it. The juries tend to be pretty skeptical of claims like that unless you have some kind of evidence to suggest that is what happened. So I think it's just likely going to depend on the universe of the evidence as a whole, right? Because it's possible we could take this notebook kind of out of consideration altogether. And if we have Luigi's cell phone at the scene and the fake ID with the same guy, then that's probably going to be enough, to get him. And that's before we even get to, other potential things that they can do in the investigation after the fact that we will learn about in the motion to suppress. The Fed's letter recovered from Mangione stated, "I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. Based on my own research, I believe that CAD refers to computer-aided design." The Fed's letter also stated, "P.S. You can check serial numbers to verify this is all self-funded, my own ATM withdrawals." So ATM withdrawals does make it sound like he's operating mostly in cash. He's not using a credit card. So that would minimize the kinds of records that would be available. The bike, the taxis, the bus tickets, and so on and so forth. However, they would potentially be able to go through and trace amounts, do like a financial analysis. Here's what he withdrew. Here's where he withdrew it. Here's what it would have cost to do this. So like, here's when he would have needed to like re-up his cash stash. Possible that is available. CAD is potentially significant because Luigi is a computer engineering major. It's his thing. That's the kind of thing he does. So just one more piece of information. Now, once again, don't tell us when and how and the circumstances in which they came to read this Fed's letter. When and how and why did you read it? Did you have a warrant? Did you not have a warrant? Did Luigi tell you could read it? Are you relying on an exception? If so, what is the safety type of consideration or, liability from theft kind of consideration that requires you to read the thing and not merely document that it's not a weapon, it's a piece of paper, it's in my possession? Maybe a problem. Maybe a problem. Based on all of the above, my review of photographs, I respectfully submit that Mangione is the shooter who shot and killed the victim on December 4th, 2024. Additionally, the notebook entries, the Fed's letter, the shooter's apparent surveillance of the Midtown Hotel on November 24th and December 4th, and the shooter's use of counter surveillance techniques and escape from New York City. Suddenly, counter surveillance techniques? What exactly are the counter surveillance techniques that they're talking about? That's like a big word to just sort of throw in here, kind of out of the blue. Is this ditching the backpack? Is that counter surveillance? I don't really know what they mean by that. That I feel like the foundation has not been well laid for me to understand what he's talking about here when he says the shooter used counter surveillance techniques. An escape from New York City all suggests that the shooter undertook extensive efforts to identify the victim, place the victim under surveillance, and track the victim's whereabouts in the time period leading up to the murder. Below are surveillance stills of the shooter and an arrest photograph of Mangione, taken from pretty much the opposite angle, right? Way overhead, way down here below. What are some of the most obvious effect that this angle has is that it coming up from above, it lengthens the nose, the bridge of the nose. Looking from below, it shortens the bridge of the nose. That's like probably the most distinctive part of these photographs here. The surveillance ones is the nose. And so it's odd to me that you wouldn't like take a photo at the same angle. That's odd. It's odd. The smiling and the cheekbones, that's another like sort of prominent, but he's just making this flat expression. So not from my standpoint, a particularly good little photo montage here. They could have done quite a bit better, and why they didn't, I really don't know. The irony in some of this is that in the body cam footage that has come out, the stills from it that we'll get to next time, this image over here on the far right does look quite a bit like him, my view anyway. It's a lot closer anyway in the body cam than it looks, from this arrest photo over here. Last photo that we have there from inside the taxi, they just kind of drop it in at the end. Why they didn't put it up there with the taxi stuff, I don't know. It's like they wanted to leave it as this kind of mic drop. But once again, we have the eyes, we have the eyebrows. It's fairly pixelated because they've zoomed in on it, and it's not high quality enough, to really get a good image. It's a different angle. Could it be him? I guess. Is it like definitively, obviously him? I'm not seeing it. And that again is just part of the problem that I have with that strong statement by the Pennsylvania police. They recognized it as him right away. You don't have magic eyes, guys. And this just might be a situation where this is part of the difference between smaller town, more rural cops and folks like the FBI in somewhere like Manhattan. You run a lot more volume in Manhattan. You run against a lot higher quality challenges. You have a lot more judges. Like, you're not always going to be routinely in the same court in front of the same people, dealing with the same prosecutors, dealing with the same defense attorneys. And so you don't necessarily have a comfort zone that you can fall into when you're in a small town and you're known and everybody knows everybody and you're always in front of the same judge and the prosecutors know you, and you get a little bit comfortable and a little bit complacent because you don't get called out. And even if you do get called out, everyone gives you the benefit of the doubt because they know you. You're the same cop that was in on, the previous case a week ago, and the week before that, and the week before that. So just one more piece in all of this is how much of a role the Altoona Police Department played in handling the initial handling of both Luigi himself and the evidence that is pretty important. This is pretty important evidence to tie him to the crime. The gun, the fake ID, the journal, the Fed's letters. If those were, I don't know, to be thrown out as improper, what sort of effect would that have on the case? So just kind of one more thing to think about, and the whole context of this case and what it means and what this process looks like. What are the kinds of takeaways, to have from it? Maybe that's one of them. The complacency that small town cops can just all too often fall into, and potentially create some rather serious downstream consequences when suddenly they find their actions outside of their home court being inspected by people who aren't going to cut them a break, aren't going to give them the benefit of the doubt, are going to ask them hard questions and make them justify what it is that they've done. So then the last thing here to take a look at is the DOJ's press conference. This is the very first statement that they released about it. Again, for the same reason. Okay, the publicity has been part of significant and repeated challenges by the defense. The court is taking them seriously, right? There's a contempt citation that's pending against the Department of Justice, not based on this statement. This statement preceded the order to not make statements, but it's just part of a pattern. And whether or not this is appropriate, is this the kind of thing that prosecutors should be saying, is a legitimate question to ask. So this was released December 19th. Edward Y. Kim, these are all the people. Acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the U.S., James Dennehy, the Assistant Director in charge of the New York Field Office of the FBI, and Jessica Tisch, the Commissioner of the New York City Police Department, announced the unsealing today of a complaint charging Luigi Nicholas Mangione in connection with the December 4, 2024 murder of United Healthcare executive Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan. Mangione was taken into federal custody today and will be presented this afternoon in Manhattan Federal Court before U.S. Magistrate Judge Catherine H. Parker. No problem so far. That's all perfectly legit. These are things that happened. These are the people who are in charge of it happening. Look at this big, bold, and offset. Big, bold, massive offset. If you're just scrolling through, this is going to be what you see. This is what's highlighted. Acting U.S. Attorney Edward Y. Kim said, Brian Thompson was gunned down in cold blood as he walked down a street in Midtown Manhattan. Thompson was allegedly killed just because he held the position of chief executive officer of a health insurance company. As alleged, Luigi Mangione traveled to New York to stalk and shoot Thompson in broad daylight in front of a Manhattan hotel, all in a grossly misguided attempt to broadcast Mangione's views across the country. But this wasn't a debate, it was murder, and Mangione now faces federal charges. This office and its law enforcement partners remain steadfast in our commitment to fight violence in whatever form it takes. Once again, with this very flowery, evocative, emotional language, gunned down in cold blood, killed just because, traveled to New York to stalk and shoot him in broad daylight. In broad daylight, really? Because it's photographed. It was quite dark. It was quite dark. This is depicting a completely different image of what actually happened, right? In broad daylight makes it sound like maybe in the middle of a crowd in Times Square. And that wasn't it at all. I mean, you can see from the photograph, these are the only two people that are within the frame of the camera that we can clearly see. It was not broad daylight. It was dark. In a grossly misguided attempt to broadcast his views across the country. So once again, this is opening statement stuff. This is theory of the case. This is their theory of the case. This is what they think about it. This is their opinions about it. This is not the evidence itself. And so part of the reason, why I have a problem with this is because the prosecutor's opinions, these are one of the things you're ethically not supposed to be putting out there in a public statement about a pending case. Your opinion on guilt doesn't belong. And yet here it is, highlighted, called out to such an extent that it might be the only thing that a whole bunch of people would see if they pull this up on their computers to look at it. Attorney General Merrick B. Garland said today the Justice Department has brought federal murder charges against Luigi Mangione. As alleged, Mangione planned his attack for months and stalked his victim for days before murdering him, methodically planning when, where, and how to carry out his crime. I am grateful to our state and local law enforcement partners for their tireless efforts to locate and apprehend the defendant and to ensure that he answers for his alleged crime. This, it's just, to me, it's snake. This is snake stuff. Like, you just drop an alleged in there as if it's not going to come across as just a purposeful disclaimer, like a wink, wink. We got to say this, but we don't really mean it. We're going to make sure he answers for it. We just have to call it alleged because that's what the rules are. Really skirting the line of what's appropriate is probably not going to be found to be a problem because he did. They're going to say disclaimer is fine. He said it's alleged. He's not offering his opinion, but it's not hard to read between the lines in these things and see what the real statement is. FBI Assistant Director James E. Dennehy said Luigi Mangione allegedly conducted the carefully premeditated and targeted execution of Brian Thompson to incite national debates. This alleged plot demonstrates a cavalier attitude towards humanity, deeming murder an appropriate recourse to satiate personal grievances. Through continued close partnership with the NYPD, the FBI maintains our steadfast commitment to fervently pursue any individual who promotes a personal agenda through violence. The problem with this is I don't even necessarily disagree with his message. Political violence should be unacceptable anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. But it doesn't mean we get to pre-assume that this guy is guilty of committing political violence. And it's not fooling anyone to give me your theory of the case and just sprinkle it with a couple of allegedlys in there As if I don't understand what you're saying. Like, yes, it's alleged, but you clearly think this, and that's what your purpose of communicating is to me, is to tell me your opinion. NYPD Commissioner Jessica S. Tisch said NYPD detectives worked relentlessly to identify and widely distribute images of the suspect who allegedly carried out this premeditated, pre-planned, targeted murder. And they are committed to assisting prosecutors in seeing this important case through to its rightful conclusion. Really? Its rightful conclusion. The senseless incident highlights the critical role of the public in the NYPD's public safety mission, and I thank everyone who saw something, said something, and did something. It is because of the public's actions that we now have an alleged killer in custody back in New York City. What is its rightful conclusion? What is that? Because if he violated his rights and evidence is going to be thrown out, and as a result of that, you can't prosecute him, then the rightful conclusion is he's going to walk. Is that what you have in mind? Certainly not saying anything about that. You're just telling me you got him. You got him in custody. And now that you have him in custody, the rightful conclusion should be that he goes down for it. But that's not how the legal process works. And this one to me is just particularly damaging because it is. It's such a defining characteristic of our legal system that you have to play fair and you have to play by the rules, and the outcome can depend a lot on your ability to discipline yourself to do that. And that is part of what the rightful conclusion is it follows from the rightful process. So this to me just is a real blow at the system that we have, where it's kind of presumed that, well, the rightful conclusion is going to be a conviction, whatever the cost. Very ends justify the means kind of philosophy to prosecution, which is what justifies things like star chambers, like torture, like all kinds of violations that we don't tolerate in a free society. This to me, when I saw this, my eyeball, I can't believe she said that. I really can't. I really can't. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm being too sensitive about it. I don't know, but this to me is just so improper that the only rightful conclusion, it's clearly implied, is going to be to convict this guy. And so therefore, if that doesn't happen, that's not a rightful, it's unjust. It's an unjust conclusion, even if it's these fuckers' own fault. Yeah, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. As alleged in the complaint, over the course of the last several months, Mangione meticulously planned the execution of Brian Thompson in an effort to initiate a public discussion about the healthcare industry. Mangione targeted the victim, tracked his whereabouts, and traveled from out of state to New York City, where the victim was scheduled to attend the company's investor conference. After arriving in the city on November 24, 2024, more than 1 week before the murder, Mangione performed reconnaissance in the area around the victim's hotel and the conference venue where the victim was scheduled to speak. Using a false identification, Mangione checked into an Upper West Side hostel. In the early morning hours of December 4th, 2024, Mangione traveled by bicycle from the Upper West Side to the area around West 54th Street and 6th Avenue. At approximately 6:45 a.m., Mangione strategically placed himself in between two cars on West 54th Street, and as the victim passed by, Mangione walked up behind the victim and fired several gunshots from a 9mm pistol, causing the victim's death. The pistol was equipped with what appeared to be a firearm sound suppressor or silencer. After the murder, Mangione fled on his bicycle northbound through Central Park and ultimately back to the Upper West Side. On December 9th, 2024, Mangione was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, while he sat in a fast food restaurant after being recognized by one of the restaurant's workers. Members of the Altoona Police Department confronted Mangione, who provided the same false identification that he used when checking into the Upper West Side hostel. Mangione was also found in possession of, among other things, a 9mm pistol and a sound suppressor consistent with the weapon used to kill the victim. Mangione, 26, of Towson, Maryland, is charged with one count of using a firearm to commit murder, which carries a maximum potential sentence of death or life in prison. One count of interstate stalking resulting in death, which carries a maximum potential sentence of life in prison. One count of stalking through use of interstate facilities resulting in death, which carries a maximum potential sentence of life in prison. And one count of discharging a firearm that was equipped with a silencer in furtherance of a crime of violence, which carries a maximum potential sentence of life in prison and a mandatory minimum sentence of 30 years. The maximum and minimum potential sentences in this case are prescribed by Congress and are provided here for informational purposes only, as any sentencing of the defendant will be determined by the judge. Mr. Kim praised the outstanding investigative work of the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force and the NYPD. Mr. Kim also thanked the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which has brought a separate prosecution against Mangione, which is currently expected to proceed to trial before the federal case. Isn't it interesting how they knew from the outset what the timing was going to look like? Isn't that interesting? I find that quite interesting. This is like extremely early on in the case, but they already knew and maybe even intended that state prosecution is going to go ahead and go first. And then we're going to use all of that that it's made available. Prior testimony and evidence and defense theories and so forth. We'll just go ahead and use that in our death penalty case. The case is being handled by the office's Violent and Organized Crime Unit. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Dominic A. Gentile, June Zhang, and Alexandra Messiter are in charge of the prosecution. The charges contained in the complaint are merely accusations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. It is nice that they actually say this part explicitly and out loud, which the New York State, the Alvin Bragg press conference did not. They didn't mention this part. They just said, it's an accusation. It's just alleged. Of course, it's still all the way down here at the very bottom, not highlighted at all, like these theories of the case with all of their inflammatory language and so forth are. So that's everything now. That's everything I intended to share with you guys. I think that part of the reason for, I personally, I have a very ambivalent type of reaction to this case. I really do. And the reason why is because I think they got a pretty good case against him. I think they got a pretty good case that he did it. We're going to see more when we get into the motion to suppress. But I understand, a lot of what is developed later, they didn't have at the time of the arrest. But even at the time of the arrest, boy, that Mark Rosario, that's pretty damning. It's just, that's pretty damning. It really is. It was such a critical mistake to make in that Pennsylvania McDonald's. If you were gonna, want to get away with a crime, that was dumb. That was just incredibly stupid, and it really was the domino that led to everything that has happened subsequently. But that's a pretty strong link. Right, the Mark Rosario from New York that checked into the hostel, and the Luigi Mangione presenting this Mark Rosario ID in Pennsylvania. Now, granted, everything that's alleged as evidence, they always have to be able to present it. I'm kind of taking it on faith that the things that they say they have, they do in fact have, and they'll be able to substantiate that. And where it's maybe going to be harder for them to do that, or where there's maybe room for argument about stuff, I try to keep that kind of thing in mind. The conclusory statements about, the distinctive clothing, for example, the description of Luigi when they asked him if he'd been in New York recently, he goes quiet and starts to shake. These things are going to be verifiable, but they're not really the core. They're helpful. They bolster what the state's theory is, what the Fed's theory is. But the key is really that circumstantial link between Mark Rosario and Luigi Mangione. So I think they got a pretty good case against him. And definitely not a fan of political violence. Definitely not a fan of political violence. No way, no how, under no circumstances, completely intolerable. That is not what America is based on. So I have, fairly negative feelings about Luigi, and kind of as a consequence of that, potentially, about Free Luigi as a movement and an ideology and so forth. I don't want to free a guy who committed political violence. And to me, at this point, looks like a pretty good chance that he did. Obviously have to wait and see how everything pans out at trial, but this is really not the case to me of like the probably innocent guy who seems to be, getting railroaded. But that said, doesn't really look like that clean of a process to me either. And so, yeah, I understand. I understand concerns about not treating people fairly. I understand concerns about just the way law enforcement operates, and creates these openings for questions to be raised, for doubt to be seeded. The litigating it in the press, I got such a big problem with that. All of this emphasis on trying to persuade me that Luigi, is guilty because you think so. And I should feel especially strongly about it because you're using such bad language, such emotional descriptions of the crime and the motive and all that. You're trying to amygdala hijack me, and instead of just encouraging me to look logically at the evidence, like the jury is going to be expected to do, like the trial process is supposed to consist of, you're trying to make me have this knee-jerk emotional response so that I already hate the guy and I already want to convict him. And that's absolutely not right. Trying to suggest to me that a conviction is the only way that justice is going to be done in this case? Huge problem with that. And so I very much understand the kind of criticisms of the process. And I understand, why folks might be concerned, might be concerned about making sure that he does in fact get a fair shake, even if he is guilty. Because, that is an important part, if not a critical part of our justice system, is that we treat people fairly, even when, and perhaps especially when, they are guilty. because that's what makes us better than them. We're the ones that play by the rules. We're the ones that are consistent with our principles. The people that go around violating our social compact and our social trust, they aren't doing that. So we have to be better. Well, guys, I see that a few of you have some comments that we can talk about. I haven't even gotten into like the the motive itself. You know, there's so many things to talk about with this case. You know, the message, you know, the anti-healthcare ish message. I mean, to me, it really doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. I don't care what your message is if your method of communicating it is committing violence. I really don't. Like, you've already lost me. And the sort of irony is that Luigi understood that on a certain level. We'll see that the next time we sit down to talk about this case. But I guess, to me, part of the irony in all of this too, and kind of the sad waste of it, is that if that's correct, you know, the motive was to trigger this national conversation about problems with healthcare. It seems to me like that was an absolute massive failure, total failure. It wasn't effective at achieving that. At least not in any kind of meaningful way that I saw. Okay, now a year later, we had a government shutdown that was at least ostensibly related to the healthcare system. But I mean, how much of the details and stuff do people even really care about in that kind of context? You know, this is just part of the problem with the way our politics works now. It's the team sport. It's the polarization, and all that really kind of matters is the which side are you on, not whether the idea is a good idea or a bad idea. And so I don't know how many people know or care that the ostensible basis for the shutdown had to do with extending Obamacare subsidies for relatively high income people in the States. Like that was the disagreement. How does that fit into the healthcare system as a whole? You know, how does insurance, this private insurance, United Healthcare, how does United Healthcare fit into the insurance system as a whole? Did you know that United Healthcare is one of the largest administrators nationwide of Medicare and Medicaid, our so-called public options, you know, our publicly funded healthcare systems that we have? I don't see that like any of this was like part of the conversation as the result of Brian Thompson being shot and killed. And you know, I feel like what kind of got dominated was the fact that he was a human being. He was a man that had children. He had a family. And the goal was, I think, to, you know, execute him as a symbol of something. But that failed badly, because I'm just not even sure what it's clear that he's a symbol of. Is he supposed to be a symbol of you know, corporate wealth and greed? Is he supposed to be a symbol of capitalist models of healthcare? Is he supposed to be a model of just like a rich guy that should be taken down? Like it was not clear. I didn't see it as clear. And so at the end of the day, no, he was a human being. He was a human being that got picked out and killed to send a message. And that's just inherently I don't think a good way to start a conversation about the symbolism. So what do we have here? We had Spicy Kitten gave us a super sticker. Thanks so much for that, Spicy. 40 Doherty. Who are these cats and where are they from? Please tell them I love them. So what is it, about 3 months ago now, back in August, I found a litter of abandoned or orphan kittens in a bush in my front yard. They were about 2 weeks old at the time. So I took them in and have found myself unable to make myself get rid of them. So so I have these 5 cats now. Yeah, I just kind of rescued them and had to do the whole bottle feeding and all that stuff, which was a lot of work, but at the same time has kind of produced a kind of cool and, I don't know, unique, I guess, relationship with these cats. Like, I've had a cat before, but it was an adult cat. You know, it was a fully formed cat when it decided it was going to hang out with me. These kittens, like, I'm very much mom to these kittens, and so there's a whole different dynamic in terms of like how they look at me, what they think about me, like, do they value my opinion and stuff? And so those are the cats. That's the story of the cats. Torin 3, your braid is closing in on the halfway point. It was fun being on Runkle's stream with you, and I'm glad I was able to help normalize your cat numbers. Yeah, Jeff, I don't know if you were watching, but on Ian's 24-hour fundraising stream on Saturday when I popped in, Torin was there. And what do you have? 7 cats or 9 cats? It was a lot more cats than 5 cats. I can say that. So, you know, it makes 5 cats almost look like just a perfectly normal and reasonable number of cats to have, right? So thank you for that, Torin. You are the real MVP. I've really enjoyed seeing this Kumihimo braid come together. Guys, go check out Torin's channel if you want to see that coming together. It's really awesome. The Kumihimo is a Japanese braiding technique, and it's used to make the closures for the obi. The obi is the sash that wraps around the kimono, and it has a tie. And so the Kumihimo is this braided cord that can have all kinds of different patterns and designs and stuff in it. So Torin has designed a Kumihimo braid for me, and we've been watching it come together. It is really super cool, and I really appreciate you doing that. Mavka, is jury nullification just prosecutor cope? Juries are instructed to give any or no weight to testimony or evidence as they see fit. It don't logic. I personally tend to think that jury nullification happens a lot less often than prosecutors might worry about it happening. We have so nullification is a very complicated concept. Here in Washington, we don't get to talk about jury nullification, certainly not in court. If we advocate for jury nullification, that's probably considered unethical under our rules. I'm not somebody who is really going to advocate for jury nullification anyway, like even if I thought it was a great thing, because I really don't. You know, the number of times when I think it would be, you know, maybe appropriate would just be so overwhelmed by the number of times that it's not, because I just my feeling is that nullification is far more often a tool of injustice rather than justice. You're specifically saying we're not going to apply the rules. And so when it tends to happen, at least historically, when we've seen it happen, it's been in situations where we like this person more than we like the victim. We don't want to hold this person accountable because you know, the law doesn't provide an excuse, but we don't really want to hold them accountable. And so this is a very common, like, lynching defense in the South and stuff like that. It's not a good precedent from my standpoint. But having said that, there's really little question that it's a power that the jury has. The jury has power, and the jury can't really be questioned about what their reasons are for voting the way that they do. The basis for the verdict is it's unimpeachable. You don't get to challenge a verdict based on the jury's thought process. And so if the jury decides we're going to disregard all of the evidence of guilt, I mean, you don't really have the ability to stop them from doing that. It really just comes down to a question of, is that a right thing for them to do or not? And yeah, that gets complicated, I guess. That gets complicated. So, no, my personal experience with juries is that juries are very diligent about wanting to apply the law and wanting to be fair and wanting to be objective and not wanting to be, improperly influenced by what they think the process should be. It's just that I recognize that there may well be some circumstances where it's gonna cross a breaking point. The jury is also told you're not to consider any consequences that flow from your verdict. So don't consider the fact that this person is going to go to prison, this person's going to lose their job, this person's going to lose their family, this person's going to lose their civil rights. And if you don't think it's fair that they're there at all, legally the jury is supposed to not consider that. Is that realistic? I don't know. Do they have the power to not do that and not be questioned about it? Probably. So I think it's extremely rare. It's not something that happens a lot. I don't expect it to be a factor in this particular case. I do expect it to be a factor in the Aaron Spencer case. If any of you guys are watching that one over there in Arkansas, that's the case where the guy shot and killed and pistol whipped the guy, old guy, 60-some-year-old guy who had been accused of abusing in the bad ways Aaron Spencer's daughter, starting from when she was 13 years old. He's not a sympathetic person. The father defending their daughter is an extremely sympathetic and relatable type of motivation that I think most people are going to have. There is some question, I think, around the edges of does this really squarely fit into the law of self-defense under the circumstances? Was there a reasonable perception of harm? Was the force proportionate? Things like that. But I'm not convinced that the jury is going to be particularly motivated to parse through all those nuances. I don't think they're really going to care that much. So that's the type of situation where, yeah, you have this extremely kind of understandable motivation on the part of the father, and you have this extremely unlikable victim. Much better chance of nullification happening in that type of situation. But political violence against somebody who was a human being with a family just because you wanted to make him a symbol of something, I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think that a lot of people are going to buy into that, because you're going to need a jury. You're going to need a jury that's unanimously like, yeah, political violence is awesome. We support it. And as much as the trend of tolerance and even celebration of political violence might be moving in an unfortunate direction, I don't think you're gonna, I really don't. I don't think you're gonna get a jury of 12 that are gonna go all in on, if they've got him dead to rights with the evidence, that are going to be like, well, but we don't really care because it was just some healthcare executive. No, I'm not buying it. Because what's to distinguish him from, somebody having a grievance with you or somebody that you care about for some reason. You might be politically sympathetic to, like, yeah, there's lots of problems with healthcare and executives earn too much and the insurance industry is this leech, you know but there's a lot of criticisms of a lot of industries. And you open the door, I think, to a lot of unwanted consequences. Once you start thinking to yourself that kind of thing is okay. And there's this kind of radical chic element to it, right? um Radical chic is that comes from that essay back in the 1970s that Thomas Wolfe wrote, and it was about this high-end, high society fundraiser that Leonard Bernstein held in his, I think it was Upper East Side, might be Upper West Side, but I think it was Upper East Side apartment in New York for the Black Panthers, the Black Panther Defense Fund. And the premise is that, it was this fashionable thing for, wealthy elites to kind of, it like made them feel dangerous and cool to be associated with this underground and in these radical beliefs and so forth, even though their own lifestyle was really not in alignment with the kind of radical ideology that they were espousing. And I think there's a lot of similarity with that. It's the idea of, like, yeah, everybody wants to be a gangsta until it's time to do gangsta things. Everybody wants to be radical until it's your post office that's getting bombed randomly, until you're the one that gets shot down in the protest. I just feel like that's opening a door that we don't want to open. I think most people don't want to open that door. I don't think we're at a tipping point in favor of, violent revolution. So I don't think it's likely to be at play in this particular case. That was kind of a long-winded response to this, but it's a good question and kind of a good thing to think about. Because it is possible that is sort of what the defense is banking on, and if they are, I wouldn't predict that that's going to go well for them. Lucy Fair, have you listened to Bob Motta's Buried podcast about the Gacy's case? It's a mind-bending exercise in a due process for the worst of us discussion. It's in my queue. I haven't been able to listen to it yet, but it is there. I have heard nothing but good things about it. I am very excited to listen to it. Bob, of course, has this inside view into the John Wayne Gacy prosecution because his dad was John Wayne Gacy's defense attorney. And so Gacy is dead. Bob Motta's father has passed away. He's inherited basically, his dad's files and stuff. There's no longer any confidentiality or privilege or anything like that with it because of the deaths of everybody involved. So he's had this extremely rare and unique insight into the defense of that case. And yeah, what it's going to be like to defend somebody like Gacy, who's just monstrous, absolutely monstrous. And, the challenges that entails, both from a personal perspective, at the end of the day, every defense lawyer has to go home and look themselves in the eye and feel okay about what they did. I mean, I'm sure there are some psychopaths out there that would do anything and not lose any sleep about it. But just knowing Bob, I don't think that would probably be Bob's dad. I think that probably wouldn't be a good fit. So you have this real personal conflict that you deal with defending somebody, monstrous like this. But then also just the challenge of trying to persuade the whole world that hates your client. They hate him. They hate him. and trying to persuade them to be fair to him when they don't want to. Like that's probably, a huge chunk of what the role of being a defense attorney is, and a big part of why it gets so frustrating. It's just because it's so easy for people to be like, look, but it's Gacy. He's a freaking monster. I don't care. I don't care what happens to him. I don't care what happens to him in prison. Always hear a lot of that, in the ether. Ooh, I know what's going to happen to you in prison. I hate stuff like that. I really do. Because it's not right, and it's making us no better than the monsters, but it's also widespread and normal, and I get it. So yeah, I haven't listened to it yet, but it is in my queue. I've got it downloaded. I just need need a nice abundance of time to be able to sit and listen through all of it, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Well, guys, so what's up next? I'm going to be going live again, same time next week. Things are a little hectic in my life right now for a variety of different reasons, not just all of these kittens, but we got some family health issues that we're having to navigate as well. So I wanted to be able to, try to get us fairly caught up with some of the significant litigation in Luigi's case before this hearing happens on December the 1st. But the soonest I'm going to be able to do it again, at least for right now, is next Monday, same time. And my intention for that is to go over the motion to suppress. Couple of things to look for in it. One, we get a lot more view of what evidence has developed since the time of the arrest. We get a little bit of a better view about like what's being challenged, how it's being challenged, what the defense take on some of this evidence is. But then it's also just a preview of what is going to be, what's going to be the subject of this hearing on the 1st. Like, what's it going to be about? What are the issues? How well is it positioned? That type of thing. So that's my plan for next Monday. Because of my time issues, I've been doing a lot more pre-recorded stuff. And so I have been watching the Robert Devine decertification hearing. We're almost done. I'm going to be releasing part 5 this afternoon on Substack, and then tomorrow on YouTube. And that will leave us with just Robert Devine's testimony. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it all in one sitting. It's fairly long. It's like 3 hours. But beyond that, it's just, I don't know if I can take it from a tolerance standpoint. I don't know. We'll play it by ear. So either 1 or 2 more to come after that. I'm also starting a new series I'm going to be putting out same kind of way. I release them, the pre-recorded videos. I release them first on Substack, just as like a little thank you to the people who pay to support me there. You can watch it without ads and stuff like that. But then I release it on YouTube 24 hours later. So I'm going to be looking at the trial of Jim Martin. If you guys aren't familiar with the trial of Jim Martin, it's in part because of the failure that was the Christie movie that got released, which is so disappointing to me. I was really devastated that it didn't end up being a better movie than it was. And I have to say, I attribute none of that to Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney was freaking fantastic. She did a great job in this movie. So Christy Martin is a groundbreaking female boxer. She is one of the women who, she's like, like the Gina Carano, Ronda Rousey of MMA. She really opened the door for women to be showcased at a high level, for women to be paid, good purses for boxing. She put on a hell of a show. She was a great boxer, real fierce, real aggressive, just so fun to watch. So of course, I know Christy, and I love Christy. But Christy had a lot going on in the background that people didn't see until much, much, much later in her career. So she was married to her trainer, Jim Martin, and that relationship was quite abusive. In many ways, it's kind of one of the it's like a paradigm, it's like a script, it's textbook domestic violence as far as the control and the methods and the escalation and so forth. So I've always thought Christy's story is important because if you don't understand domestic violence very well, it'd be so easy to look at her and be like, but she's a boxer. She's literally a champion boxer. Like, she fights with her hands. How on earth could she be getting abused by her husband? And it's because that's not what abuse is about. It's not about physical control nearly as much as it's about mental control and psychological control. And it's only when those start to fail that the escalation gets up and the violence becomes more and more physical. So yeah, Jim Martin was tried. And back in 2012, I'm not going to give too much away about it, but it was quite a trial. And Christy testified. So it's kind of my way of trying to pay tribute to her story in a way that I feel like the movie that was out just did a very poor job of doing. And again, it's not Sydney's fault. She was great. It was just a terrible script. It didn't really explain to you what anything meant or why these events are happening. It was just sort of, it was a plot, these things happened and then this other thing happened. There's no takeaway that I'm supposed to get from all of it. And there's so many takeaways that you could get from Christy's story. And that's the kind of thing that I'd like to talk about. So starting that, I will be releasing those as well. In the coming days. Very excited about it. So that's what I got going on in the short term, guys, as far as what to keep an eye out for. So if any of that interests you, I do hope to see you there. I do appreciate all of you being here today. Yeah, it's always good to see, all the familiar names and the great conversations and the just, good ideas people have, whether you agree with me or don't agree with me. I'm not some absolute authority on anything at all. I just kind of have my own opinions about stuff, and those opinions aren't always going to be shared by everybody. And that's okay. I think that's an important part of looking at cases like these and the system as a whole and how it operates and how we react to these crimes and the way that we cover them and all that type of thing. Because there is so much difference of opinion about it. I think we learn a lot more when we can share where we're coming from individually. So I appreciate all of you contributing to all of that. We'll say goodbye to Gus. Gus is back. Hey, Gus. He's yeah, hi, bud. He's really like the lap fixture, he's pretty much always going to be in somebody's lap. He's a lap cat. He's not necessarily like the most lovey cat, as you can see. He's going to sit here and chew on me, but he sure does like to lie on my lap. It's like a very nice, warm place for him to be. So they're going to be waking up for their nap soon, and I need to clean up this chaos that they have caused in my room. So thank you all for being here with me. I look forward to seeing you guys back again soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Days are getting short, not a whole lot of light. Make sure you're doing what you need to do if you're like me and very sensitive to these long nights, all this darkness. Get what you can out of the daytime. Take your vitamin D if you need it, but just, be looking out for yourselves as we start to head into this long, dark winter. and let it not bring you down. So thank you guys very much, and we'll see you again next time.